Good evening, everybody. We're back with another episode of the Pressing Forward podcast, and I'm super excited today to uh, get this guy that owns Maneuver Training Solutions. He's actually thinking about changing it to Two Dudes with Sweet Beards and Long Hair Solutions since we started chatting, but we'll talk about that later. But Blake Flannery is here with me today, United States Marine, spent 20 years in the Marine Corps, infantry to being a force reconnaissance Marine. Blake, how you doing today, dude?
Hey, Al, thanks for having me. I'm doing pretty good today. It was a good day. I was in the shoot house earlier, so always a good day.
I'm very jealous being in the Chicagoland area. Let's just say that there's not too many uh training shoot houses. There's plenty down in the city. You can find plenty of shoot houses, whether it's drugs or guns, but nothing in the sense of like making yourself tactically proficient.
Yeah, not in a controlled training environment. No.
Yeah. So we'll jump into it, dude. I know that obviously I've like to do a little bit of research, and I follow the things that you're doing on social media. You grew up mainly in Connecticut, right?
Yes, mainly.
Okay, so what was life like growing up on the East Coast, and what kind of stuff were you involved in before you got into your military service?
So, my parents divorced when I was about three. And after that, we kind of bounced around, not too far. We stayed primarily within the same county, within Connecticut. But it was like, every year, new school. I did like two different schools in kindergarten, then another school in second grade, another school in third grade, another school fourth grade. Um, and that continued up until I was 11, going into sixth grade. My mom remarried, and my stepdad started doing really well for himself. And we actually bought my grandparents' old home. They moved down to Virginia, and they sold us their home, which was a home I was familiar with, having always visited my grandparents. And it was a home that my mother had grown up in. It was the school, the town that she had grown up in, and the schools that she had gone to. So that was a very nice change from the constant moving up to that point.
Yeah, that's got to be
Um,
difficult to deal with as a young man. I mean, getting to, sixth grade and you don't have really any stability in like the sense of growing up with the same people. You're constantly shifting to a new school. You've got to immerse yourself into a new environment and kind of make your way with a group of people that you have no idea who they are.
yeah. And I was a very shy kid. I did not like meeting new people in any way. And I was always taller and I was skinny. So like I stuck out, being taller. It's like, oh, hey, there he is. Like, can't hide. Um, and the fact that I was very shy led to me like trying to avoid interactions. And so I was easily singled out by a lot of bullies because I was always the new kid. So a lot of fighting growing up. My mom put myself and my brother in karate right around the time the Ninja Turtles came on the scene and they were getting really popular.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, like now I know karate, so that should make things easier in the playground. Uh, it
You value,
didn't.
I was gonna say too much Karate Kid, man. You're like, ah, that's me right there.
It wasn't so much that it wasn't effective. It was more so of they just used more bullies.
Yeah.
It's like once I could win a like a one-on-one confrontation, then it became like four-on-one. Uh, so that that kind of backfired.
So from
Um,
from a young age, you've been facing some adversity and overwhelming odds. If like not only from the things of it's difficult growing up and transitioning around like that, but anybody that's had the interactions with bullies, like every day, it's like you wake up and you're like, dude, do I have to fight this kid on the playground? Am I going to get jumped after lunch or when I'm walking home from school? And that's unfortunate, but I think that builds some thick skin that a lot of kids don't have today, in the sense of no one's ever, a lot of these kids nowadays have never been stuck in the face before, and they don't know what it's like to bleed or to have to fight your way out of a situation. And from, young age, it seems like you've well, somebody else put you in that position quite a few times.
Yeah, and it was also tricky because we'd see our dad every other weekend, and then go see him. I'd want to tell him about it, like I'm getting picked on at school, and I was having a hard time academically. So he would just kind of lecture me about like how important it is to do well in school, and it's how to be the bigger man and turn the other cheek. And he tried giving me little tips and things here and there, like help me learn how to fight, but he wanted me to avoid fighting. And I was like, I can't avoid it. Like it seeks me out. So there was some help, but wasn't really the guidance that I needed. And then my mom just didn't believe me. My mom always just presumed like I was just making it up. And then, occasionally there would be a call from school because there would be a big brawl that day. And so the school would call home to say that I was involved in a big fight. And my mom would think that it was all my fault. So then I was kind of getting in trouble for it at home. So there wasn't like any support,
Yeah.
figure it
Yeah.
out, like, what am I going to do here? So I don't know. I mean, it was rough, and it's not like my childhood was terrible. It's just like those aspects of it were difficult. Didn't really know how to figure it out. Didn't really have anyone to help me figure it out, and having to figure it out on my own. And instead of having like constantly having adults like helicoptering, hovering over me, to keep all the other kids away, and tell me that I'm special and tell me that I'm awesome. And I think me having to work that out and figure it out kind of on my own, and then try to seek out friends and try to use like my friends to like help me figure it out, definitely built some resiliency.
Oh, for
And I
sure.
think that's one of the things that began to like I would never say it's good to have bullies, but it's kind of that necessary just social convention. Like they're always going to be there, and you try so hard in schools to eliminate it, and then kids grow up into adults and they go out in the real world, and it's like there's no one to save you from the bullies now.
Yeah.
And people really don't know how to handle it. And so yeah, it's a weird thing. Like you go so hard trying to prevent a thing that you end up kind of creating a worse situation with an individual's ability to develop socially in a way.
Well, and two, like if you think about the bullying aspect of things, like, just because you're not getting picked on the playground anymore, that bullying factor takes a role in different facets in life, whether it be toxic leadership or a boss or a confrontation with somebody in the real world. And if you go through your whole, well, that initial experience in life without confrontation like that, and then you get immersed into the real world with having no experience on how to handle yourself in situations like that, whether you get positive advice or you get told nothing and you've got to figure it out on your own. At least you've had some kind of calloused skin, even if it's like a light layer, to be able to stand up for yourself or to be able to speak up when something's wrong, or there's whatever. We'll get into further down the road situations, but so you Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle it up. You're doing some karate, standing up for yourself on the playground, trying to figure out that, um, I guess, coming into your own as a young man. And then high school rolls around, and you said you were a sophomore year in high school, and something had happened, and some kids said that they sent force reconnaissance in.
Yeah. Yeah, F-117 had been shot down in somewhere in the Baltic. I forget exactly where it was. I was like, holy shit, like that's a big deal. Like a stealth fighter got shot down. I'm like, it's a stealth fighter. Like, how'd that get shot down? And like, a good number of other kids were kind of talking about it. And yeah, one of the other guys, he turned around and he's like, yeah, they'll probably just send in force recon. I'd never heard of that before. I'd heard of SEALs, I'd heard of Green Berets, I had not heard of Force Recon. And the guy was kind of a military buff. He was kind of into that stuff. And I'm like, what is it? And he explained. He's like, the way he explained it was like, well, basically it's the Navy SEALs, but for the Marine Corps. And I was like, well, like the Marine Corps is supposed to be the best. So if they have something like Navy SEALs, they must be like the literal best of the best. Like, yeah, I'm gonna be a Marine. Like just like that, just right there. Everyone's like, what? Because up to that point, around 10, not 9 or 10, I found basketball. And it was a sport I was actually decent at. And so I just went all in and like spent all my time playing basketball, training basketball, became obsessed. Like I had jerseys and shirts, like coming to school with like a New York Knicks hat and a Chicago Bulls jersey over like a Philadelphia 76ers t-shirt. Like everything was about basketball
No.
all the time. And then just like a full 180 was like, no, I'm going to join the Marine Corps. And everyone's like, no, no, that's just a weird thing that you're just saying. But I was like, no, and I kept at it. And one of the people were like, this dude's actually going to go through with this. Like
Yeah.
he is on. And then, in typical fashion, I went all in on that route of like, I'm going to be in the military. I'm going to be in the Marine Corps. Um, I'm going to be Force Recon. I'm going to be a Navy SEAL. Like, I'm going to try to do it all if I can.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at a young age like that, to have the ambitions of one, I don't think if, and maybe putting words in your mouth here, but like, or assuming that you didn't know the kind of sacrifice that went into being a Marine at that point in time. At that, 15 years old, you might have read some books, seen some videos, and been like, oh yeah, these guys are badass. But until you get there, you know, did you have any idea, like knowing what you know now, when you're at that age and making that decision to want to join the Marine Corps or thinking about taking that step to do it, would you have thought about any of the things that you've experienced along that route?
Not fully, not in every aspect. I did a lot of research on it because again, when I get into something, like I go all in on it. So I was always like researching things online. It was a little tough at first because I didn't tell my family until I was almost a junior in high school. I told my mom a little bit before my 16th birthday. I finally told my mom uh, because I was just so anxious. I needed her because I didn't have a license yet. I was only 15. I needed her to drive me to the recruiter's office because I wanted to see if there's like a program where I could like go and work out with them and train with them,
Yeah.
which there is. It's the land entry program, but you actually have to be 17 and sign up and all that. Um, so it was like only online research and I mean, my parents probably thought I was like surfing for porn, but I was actually just trying to hide the Marine from them and like looking at pictures of military dudes.
Uh,
I told my mom I could start like openly like reading books about it. So I started getting a lot of books, mostly about SEALs, because I mean, don't want to make a comment, but that was most readily available book was, by SEALs. Really good stuff all about SEALs in Vietnam. Um,
so you're kind of like Ralphie in the Christmas Story with this Red Rider. You're kind of just like putting subtle, like you got the books and you're putting these subtle little notes everywhere, like you might be thinking about
yeah,
joining the military.
it wasn't until I was a senior or almost a senior in high school and I was going to need my dad's signature to enlist at 17 that I had to like tell him about it. Um, but yeah, it was I did a lot of research, so I felt like I had a really good idea of what I was getting into. I think about as much as you really could without having someone to actually talk to who was in it. I think I had a fairly good grasp. I understood that there would be pain and discomfort and levels of suffering and sacrifice you just can't appreciate. You can know about it, you just can't appreciate it until you're going through it.
Right, right. It's
That's
like the fear of the unknown of actually like experiencing it, because you can sit on YouTube or you can get ears open, eyeballs click, and watch that 100 times before you go ship off to boot camp, or like you watch, somebody run range 400 and be like, man, that's intense. But you're never gonna know what it's like to have somebody, another grown man, yelling in your face, or climbing the slide for life or whatever, going down that, or maneuvering on an enemy position, or all those encompassing things. Until you live it, until you do it, it's just all speculation at that point. But so obviously you get your how are your parents feeling? Like signing you up at 17. Like, what kind of shit are you guys talking about? Like, is going through their heads?
uh so my mom was pretty easy. I basically told her like this is what I want, this is what I'm gonna do, and that's kind of the end of it. And my mom just accepted, and I think she halfway thought that I wasn't going to go all the way through with it, and she's just going to go along, right? And at some point I'll get scared and I just won't go through with it. So she gave her permission like immediately. She took me to the recruiter's office when I was 15, and that guy was like, dude, you need to get the hell out of here. Like I'm not, you're too young, I can't even be talking to you. um and then she brought me again. So I went back a year later. The office had moved, and my mom was like, well, she told you, like, you have to
You're
be
you're
17.
trying to pull a fast one on them,
Yeah,
like
but
they.
I was happy hoping I could pull a fast one. But the other part was, it was like, I want this like done as soon as possible.
Right.
And it's 2 weeks before my 17th birthday. So I went into the recruiter and I was like, hey, well, I showed up and he didn't think I was actually going to show up. And so like he excused himself to go get changed into his uniform because he was just sitting there in civvies in the office. So he comes back out and he's like, well, here's who I am. And I was like, I'm 16. And he's like, oh crap. I'm like, no, no, hold on. I understand that there's not much we can do right now, but I am just letting you know that in 2 weeks, I'm going to come back in here and I want everything ready. I just want to sign that paperwork and move on. Like, get the next thing. I'm not going to come back in 2 weeks and we're going to go through the rigmarole and you're going to tell me you have to go get the paper, whatever. I'm like, I want it there. I'm going to sign everything I need to sign. And like, we're going to make this happen on the day I turn 17.
Wow.
And he's like, okay, okay. And then I came back. It was actually the day after my 17th birthday. Um, and again, my mom was like, all right, yeah. Oh, you need like a parental consent? She's like, yeah, here it is. And we went forward with the process, but he's like, we're going to need your biological father's permission. So I'd already spoken with him about it and let him know what my intentions were. And I was like, look, this was in Connecticut. My dad lived in New York State, about an hour and a half away. I was like, I don't think he'll come here, but if you will make the drive out to his house, like I'm going there this weekend, if you will make the drive out and we can sit down in their home and talk about this, I think we can convince him to, give his parental permission. And they did. The recruiter came out and, we talked and finally came down. My dad just looked at me. He's like, you're just going to do this anyways when you're 18 if I don't sign. And I'm like, yeah. And then he looked at me. He's like, and you're going to resent me if I don't sign this right now. And the answer was yes.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say that. I kind of just looked at him and he was like, that's a yes.
Yeah.
So he signed. Um, so yeah, he signed. That took some time. So I ended up not going up to the processing station until November of 2000. Oddly enough, I think it was like right after the Marine Corps birthday. I think it was like November 16th or something like that. Um, yeah, so I swore in the beginning of my senior year, and I still think that my family just wasn't like fully convinced that this was like really going to be a thing. And they took solace in the fact, again, this is 2000,
Yep.
and even going me graduating high school in June of 2001, there's nothing going on.
Yep.
We're at peace right now. So they were like, probably nothing can happen. And
And
then
then,
I shipped off to boot camp, and about halfway through, 9/11 happened.
yeah, because you left for boot camp in July, right? July of 2001. You went out there and did you go to boot camp in Paris Island, right?
Yep.
Yep. So
Yep. Paris
you're
Island, South
in
Carolina.
Paris Island and it's September 11th of 2001. What's going on?
So we were on I forget what phase it fell into, but we were in rifle range. And we were on the grass week for our marksmanship qualification. Um, I was with the group that was outside on the snap and barrel, and for anybody who's not listening, it's just a barrel with miniature targets painted on there to simulate the target's distance, and you're just doing dry fire. And just sitting there dry firing, going through position after position. And the drill instructor's mood changed like drastically. And I was like, oh, something happened. Now, I didn't think something like what actually happened. I was like, somebody has fucked up really bad.
Somebody's got peanut butter and jelly in their fucking Foot Locker, you know?
It's messed up
Yeah.
so bad that they don't even want to yell at us right now. Like, they're so angry that if they come at us right now, they're going to do something. They're going to wait till we get back to the house, and then they're going to mess us up where no one can see and there's no witnesses. I was like, crap, what happened? And I had like a constant guilty conscience. So I'm like, did I do something wrong? Like,
Yeah.
what the hell's going on? And we get called into the ISMIT, the little virtual trainer, because it's our rotation. And as I'm in line outside, they had a lounge and the door was cracked and I could see a TV, and all I could make out was a building on fire, which it's the news. There's always something awful going on the news. So I was like, oh, I didn't think anything of it. And then, somebody must have noticed the door was cracked and they pushed it closed. Thought nothing of it, right? There's always bad stuff on the news. And I couldn't make out what it was. I just saw what looked like a building on fire. Uh, we go into the actual, virtual trainer, and one of the other recruits were picking up on the kind of air around everything, and they asked the marksmanship instructor, like, "Sir, what's going on?" And his words were verbatim, "We've been bombed." And I looked at him like, "We've been bombed? Someone bombed us?" He's like, "Yes, we were bombed." So it all made my head, I'm like, someone flew planes over, you know, our country and dropped bombs on US soil. I was like, oh, it's game on. Like,
Right.
you don't do that in the United States of America. It's game on. We are going to war. But still didn't actually know what had happened. Like, I still have pictures of, enemy bomber planes flying over US territory.
That's wild.
Yeah, I don't know how long it went on or when they actually told us. The next memory that I can recall from the time was we knew at some point, and we had a company formation, and the battalion commander came out and he kind of talked to us about more of the details that were known at that point, which this is like the next day or 2 days later. Um, he was like, we don't know what's going to happen with your recruit training. You guys might be finishing sooner than you expected to.
Wow.
And he said that, and I was like, oh, we are going to war.
Yeah.
Like, it's on. Like, you don't end boot camp early unless like it's on and we need to mobilize like the whole nation against somebody else. Like, this is crazy. But that didn't happen. It definitely changed the air though. There were a lot of people who were like here and there, they would ask like, oh, senior drill instructor, I'm a contract for such and such MOS, would I ever have to go to combat? And usually it was a very roundabout answer, like, yeah, you're part of the Marine Corps. If Marine Corps goes to combat, like, you'll be part of it, but you're just, you do your thing. But now everyone was like, "Sir, are we going to war? Sir, are we going to war? Sir, am I going to have to go to war?" And to the senior's credit, he was like, "Yeah, bitch, you join the Marine Corps. Like, if the country goes to war, they're sending the Marine Corps. You're going to go. Like, that's what you signed up for. Like, I get it. You came here for college,
Yeah.
but there's something else."
So what's like an example of the shift in the mindset that not only the drill instructors had, but the recruits, right? Where there's some guys that were like shit, like holy shit, like I did not sign up for this, like right away. Were they? Did you see that?
I don't think it fully grasped all of us, because a lot of guys didn't even believe it was real. A lot of guys believed it was just a thing that they do every
Oh my,
time to try and push you.
yeah, dude.
And the mind,
I have this is sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but when I was at infantry squad leaders course, we do like the urban effects, right? So we were like set up in like the whatever our like patrol bases or where we were like running our squads out of, and they're like, "All right, everybody, stop!" And like they had been playing like a crying baby on this loudspeaker for like 15 hours. It was unbelievably ridiculous. But then the music stops, the whatever, and we're like, "What the fuck?" They're like, "Everybody, get outside now!" And they're like, "North Korea just bombed the fucking fleet. Like they just took out a bunch of naval carriers, and like everybody," and we're like, this is all like I was a lance corporal still at the time, yeah, but I'd already been on a deployment. And you got all these senior corporals and sergeants that have multiple combat deployments, and it's like everyone's like taking it back for a second. They're like, all right, we just wanted to like get you in the mindset of like how would you feel, use that to fuel you further through these training evolutions and shit. And for you guys in recruit training, that's like you're connect thinking some people are thinking like this is something that they're using to get us to be more aggressive or work harder or be more dedicated to it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
yeah, that's what a lot of the guys thought it was. And it wasn't until people started getting letters from home, that Time magazine came out with the towers on fire on the cover, and newspaper clippings were sent. And then finally everybody like realized, okay, this really did happen. um and there's really stuff going on. But by the time we graduated like a week before Halloween, so no one really, there wasn't the same immediate sense of urgency as when it had first happened, and we were told like, oh, you might end boot camp early, and shit like that. uh and it I don't think it really hit us, um because in boot camp you're in a very isolated environment. So not having full access to media and everything else, it was really difficult to get a pulse for what was going on in the outside world, and you're just so consumed by what's going on around you in basic training. There really wasn't time to pontificate, what was going on in the real world.
Yeah.
So it kind of changed. I'm sure more so for the other guys. For me, um, it kind of didn't. I just expected that joining the Marine Corps that I would go to combat. Like I expected it. I didn't know
It's
what would
part of the
come.
job. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I just figured like I knew Marines were always deploying it. Really understand like what MEUs were and what they did, but I knew they existed. Um, and knowing what I did know about history and then what we learned in boot camp, I'm like, well, Marines have kind of always been fighting in little conflicts all over the world, and then wars break out and the Marines fight. So it's like it's what we do. Like I accepted that as part of it. So to me, it just seemed like a continuation of reality, kind of.
Yeah.
And I was already going to take everything I did seriously, like it was important to me. So for me, it didn't change too much. Definitely got into a few spats with other recruits about it because I thought they were being a little soft, and kept complaining and whining and oh, am I gonna have to go to combat? I'm like, you signed up to be an aviation mechanic. Like, you're not gonna be on the front lines. You're gonna turn wrenches, dude. Like, you can stop soiling your britches every night. Uh,
Yeah, or the guys that would be like crying, like you'd be doing your BDR like after your bedtime routine, or they used to like give us like 20 minutes or 15 minutes to read letters and shit, and you'd have guys like getting letters from home, and they would just be sopping. I'm talking like full on crying, and you're like, I thought that was in like, where's Arlie Ermy, dude? Where's the like, when you watch Jarhead and he's like, like I got on the wrong bus, sir, and he gets his face smashed into the chalkboard or the blackboard. It's like I thought that like those previous thing, like I thought that's what Marine Corps boot camp was going to be like. It definitely like semi met those
I
expectations, but
Yeah, like same. Like it wasn't until like they walked us into the squad bay for what was our platoon. So like flew down with a group of poolies that I've been training with, and like pretty much all the other poolies were all pretty much like me. They were athletic. They were all pretty strong. They were close to my size. There were a couple of guys who were a little more heavy set, but they were still athletic. Like they were just like football players or something. And everyone was motivated about becoming a Marine. And even like the initial group that we were stuck with when you like first get off the bus and then you're parceled out to your platoons, and I walk into the squad bay and I was like, what the hell? I immediately started to question my decision. I was like, this is wrong. Like, this is all wrong. Like none of these dudes are like me. Um, and the big thing was the BCGs, the
yeah,
the glass that they give. Like, there's no way to look tough in those glasses. You don't you don't look cool. And so, being an 80s and 90s kid, I immediately see all these guys with glasses, not understanding like you can't wear contacts and
right.
just how many do wear contacts. So I'm like, it's a bunch of skinny and fat nerds. It's a bunch of losers. Like, what the hell did I do? I should have gone and been a Navy SEAL, like telling myself I would have been in boot camp, with nothing but SEAL candidates.
Yeah.
Um, immediately, wrong decision. This is all fuck. This is bad. Uh, but then we start training, and I find out that like okay, like this dude's okay, and this dude's okay, and like, oh, that dude's actually in really good shape, and that dude's in really good shape. It's the
Yeah, it's
glasses.
yeah,
But
like
yeah, there was still a lot of dudes that were just like just barely barely meeting the minimum physical requirements between like their fitness and like their actual health to be there. Like
yeah.
we had a dude he got recycled to us after being in the pork chop platoon, and just a gross looking dude. And sometimes I felt bad for him, but like we go on PT runs and he would crap his shorts
Oh, come no.
like every run. Like every run
Oh,
got
jeez.
to the point that, and he was super slow. So he's always like the last guy to finish. One, because he's out of shape, and two, because he's probably, waddling with a,
Turd in
big
his
old
pants.
short. And, but, when we stop at the PT field, there'd be the one drill instructor that stuck with him, and it would just be like, senior going to the house. And they would just keep running back to the squad because they got to change the dude's drawers.
Jeez.
And I'm like, damn. And uh in Suicide Watch, I was like, I don't understand, like, why do guys want to kill themselves?
Yep.
Like, i don't I don't understand this. I think that was more of a culture shock than the yelling. Like, when it finally started happening, I was like, oh, here it is. This is, like you were saying, the Full Metal Jacket, the Army, the hollering, getting hit, getting pushed, getting shoved, getting thrown around. Like, okay, this is what I expected.
Right.
not all the other stuff. Like I didn't know how to deal with that.
It's
So
definitely a weird thing when you see like you thought everybody had like signed up to do this, which they obviously did, but we when we did like the suicide watch thing, I remember this. I can't remember his name, but I remember him because he was just one of those kids, and he had this like back alley tattoo done. I mean, in good intentions, it was like a memorial to 9/11, but it was like, just within regs on his forearm, like right, on here, and it was this horrible screaming bald eagle with like these. It looked like somebody did it while they were either on drugs or just I don't know, it was bad, but I remember that about him. But he was one of the kids that was on suicide watch, and they've got his rack in the middle of the squad bay. And not only would we have to like man the post at the entry of the squad bay, we'd have to have somebody also doing suicide watch on this kid because he got to this point where I don't know, like he mentally snapped. He wasn't in our platoon anymore. I remember when we were graduating from boot camp, like during Marine Week, like all marching by, and we got our EGAs and everything, and um I see him in one of the out process. If he would have just stuck it out or like gone through it, obviously he needed to get weeded out. But so many of these guys are just so weak-minded and give up at the first sight of adversity or the first obstacle that they face. And it's what I always say is like, did you think it was Call of Duty? Like, did you think that you were just gonna get like there wasn't this progression of building blocks that you had to go through. Like your baseline is here, dude. Like all these things that you need to do to increase that to the level of, I mean, as proficient as you can be as a recruit. But guys like 2 weeks in are talking about committing suicide or they miss their mommy or their girlfriend, and you're like, yeah, this guy should not be here at all.
for too many people, it's more of an emotional decision to join. For whatever reason, they broke up with their girlfriend, or they just got divorced because they got married too young, or a family member died, and something happened. Run in with the law, like whatever, something happened, and they just make like an emotional decision, like fuck it, I'm gonna go join the Marines. Or just join the military, and then the Marine Corps is just the first one that like happened to get their signature.
Right.
There are like so many guys I've run into who had no idea what they're literally no idea what they were getting into. Or like they understood Marine Corps, they just walked in and were like, I want to leave soon because they're already, like 20, 21, 22, some odd years old. And they just walked in like, I want to leave tomorrow. And the recruiter's like, well, it ain't that fast, but we will fast track your ass and get you out the door. And then they're out as soon as possible with no idea.
Right.
And even that time frame when you walk in the recruiter's office and you're like, I want to leave now, even if it takes you like 3 days to process between like getting up to MEPS, taking the ASVAB, going through the physicals, getting approved, swearing in, and then them organizing a ship date for you. Like that's still 3 days that you can research what the hell you're getting into. And a lot of people just don't.
Yeah. Well, and that too, it could be on the individual to, like when we get into what comes after time and service and advocating for yourself, like being, able to like, okay, let me look at this book or even asking your recruiter some more questions. And we all know that recruiters can, you know, swindle, if you will, guys to make decisions on here, just sign this. Go open contract. You're more than likely going to be infantry, dude. That's where they send all the guys open contract. Real, like those little ways of, sliding in to get people to sign up. But yeah, that's on those guys though. If you're not going to prepare yourself for what the Marine Corps boot camp is gonna bring to you, even if it's just watching Full Metal Jacket and being like, oh shit, this is what goes on. But it seems like you from the start, I mean, obviously from that point in time where you had heard about Force Recon, and it had this, goal or this mindset, this mission to go join the Marine Corps, I would assume you excelled while you were in boot camp. Not that I don't know if you were a squad leader or guide or if you stood out in certain aspects of it, but I can assume that you got through boot camp
Yeah,
pretty unscathed.
fairly like I actually became a squad leader only because um the guy who was initially assigned squad leader got hurt and got recycled.
Okay.
I had an aversion to responsibility and leadership initially. I didn't want it. I just thought I just wanted to be like the guy in the background, like just the team guy, like just give me a rifle and point me in the direction, right? Like don't put me in charge.
Right.
Uh, so I made squad leader, and I mean I kept it throughout boot camp. A couple other guys got rotated out, but for the most part, we had the same squad leaders throughout. I mean, it's not a huge accomplishment in boot camp, right? Just kind of like there. Um, but yeah, I mean, I got through it. Boot camp was well enough. The biggest mistake that I made was I expected that I would excel at everything. Like I've got this in the bag. Like I grew up hunting, I grew up shooting. Like I understand these things. So I'm basically taking like existing skills and just transferring them over into the military. And I've been doing all this research. Like I should be really good at this. And I mean the knowledge was easy and I didn't really struggle with learning anything. But when I got yelled at, I took that as like I had failed. And then I'm like, I failed. I suck at this. And like I just got inside my own head and not realizing like no, you get yelled at. Like that's the whole point. That's like their only means of communication is to yell at you.
Right.
Uh, so that's definitely something like when people reached out to me about like, hey, I'm gonna go to boot camp soon. That's one of the things I point out. I'm like, you're gonna get yelled at. It's the whole point. It doesn't mean you're failing. It doesn't even mean you're bad. Maybe you made a mistake, right? But that's the only way you're ever going to be communicated to, right? It's like don't let the volume get in your OODA loop, because I definitely did. I just totally treated it as like, okay, I'm failing and I suck at this. Um, and there's a lot about like the whole boot camp environment. I think kind of doesn't really set you up for like success to be a Marine. Like it gives you some of the basics for sure, gives you basics, it inculcates you into the culture. You understand the customs and courtesies and the uniforms and marksmanship, uh, but doesn't really set individuals up to like come into their own and be adults. And then you go off to the school of infantry and it's like the same thing. They just keep treating you like your children
Right.
and treat them like children. They act like children and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're like, well, they keep acting like children, so we have to keep, putting more rules and trying to box them in harder to keep them from making bad decisions and doing stupid shit,
Right.
tightening up that box. And yeah, so I mean,
It
as a
makes for like
whole,
a closed-minded, if you gave, obviously you don't want a bunch of privates running around like doing stupid shit, but in the sense of, how big our class was at ITB, and you've got like four squad leaders essentially for and another guide for these. I don't know. I honestly think we were at ITB with like 120 or 140 dudes. This is 2009, so like the numbers are plussed up, but you like you overwhelm these groups of instructors with this mass. And I'm sure for you guys, in 2001 after 9/11, it's just numbers being plussed up and guys being pushed through. And, I'm sure there's guys transitioned to MOSs, or maybe like they were open contract and they probably filled a lot of those open contracts with, infantry riflemen at that point in time. I would assume plussing those numbers up so that, corral this fucking cattle, into these boxes and then have to like delegate the
yeah,
responsibility and shit. That's tough.
yeah. I mean, back then too, to be an SOI instructor, um, there was no special training to it. It wasn't a special duty assignment. It was just kind of your average B billet, and you would just get guys sent there, and you would get guys who were sent there because they were squared away and they requested to go there, and that's where they wanted to go do like kind of an easy tour. And then you get guys who were sent there because they were kind of a problem for their unit, and their unit wanted to get rid of them. So it's like, well, we can send them to go teach at SOI. And everyone kind of viewed it because like I checked into my first unit, first time 5th Marines, and I was literally told forget
Forget
everything you
everything.
learned at SOI.
Yep.
And I was like, I mean, at the time I was like, yeah, okay, cool. Like now I learned the real stuff. Looking back at it, like that's asinine. Like it shouldn't be forget, it should be remember what you were taught because that you learn the basics of becoming an infantryman. So you need to remember that, and we're gonna build upon that.
Right.
But so they're like, forget everything. One dude threw a 6-5 at me and was like, read this boot. And so I spent a 3-day weekend just like reading, the infantry squad manual cover to cover, like 3-4 times a day, just going through the whole thing, cover to cover, every again and again and again. Like, and I had all this great, you know, theoretical knowledge. But it took a bit to be able to put that to actual practice.
Yeah, because that's this point in time when you probably get to 1-5, this is, I don't know, beginning of 2002, right? You graduate boot camp sometime in October, 3 months at or SOI. So you're probably like February, maybe beginning of March or something, getting to 1st Battalion, 5th Marines.
January 2002.
Oh, okay, shit.
Towards towards the end. So I graduated from infantry training battalion like early January, like January 11th,
Dude,
10th,
that's
something like
so
that.
crazy. I graduated from ITB in Camp Pendleton. I graduated from boot camp or October 9th of 2009, and then I graduated from Infantry Training Battalion on January 11th of 2010. So that'd be great. Like, just that pipeline just circulates through, constantly.
Uh, and right towards the end, I don't know if it was before or after Christmas leave, but myself and 4 other guys had orders to the West Coast, and this is now in North Carolina at School of Infantry East. So we get pulled aside, and of course, me, guilty conscience. I'm like, what did I do wrong? Like, why are we being singled out? Like, and they're like, hey, just so you guys know, it looks like you're going to be checking into your units in combat. And we're like, oh, okay. I was like, this is happening. Like this baptism by fire thing I hear about. Like this is going to happen.
Wow.
This is pretty wild. Um, Spoiler alert, it didn't happen. What it was when I found out, because when I first checked in, the battalion was empty because everyone was on leave except for the guys on restriction. The battalion had been given a mission to seize an airfield in Tajikistan, which is just north of Afghanistan, and then from that airfield, uh, operations would be launched into Afghan. So the battalion was stood up for the mission, and they missed their Christmas leave because of it. So it was like this basically the same day that I was graduating ITB, their mission had been stood down, and now they were being given 30 days of leave. So I checked into a ghost town, and my first 30 days of the fleet, I was kind of on my own program.
Right.
It was like go check in with the company gunny every morning, and then we would have like some menial tasks, maybe go on a working party or just go sit in your room and don't do anything dumb until like 1600 and then go back and check in with the company gunny. So it was a very weird existence for that first month, but then guys started trickling back in and I started meeting all the guys who were on restriction. So by the time like all the dudes came back, they were like, well, you're a boot, you're a new guy. But because like I'd been there for just those 30 days and like I knew some of the guys that were on restriction,
You're like,
I was like in. I was like kind
yeah,
of in.
yeah.
And right as they all came back, we got a fresh, boot drop. We got I don't even know how many dudes. It was a massive formation. It must have been like 100, like a whole ITB class, like 100 something guys got delivered to the battalion. And our company alone got like 40. So all the attention went to like the new guys. So I kind of just got to like step off the side and stand in the shadows, while the new guys got the attention of all the seniors coming off their leave blocks. So I kind of got
Gray
lucky.
man, the gray man just blending in. Um, but so they take the focus and put it onto these new guys. I'm sure there's a lot of yelling and get over here, hey, stupid boot, you know what you're getting into. So this has got to be what, like spring of 2002 that you guys are getting to this point.
Yeah, so they all come off leave February 2002. We start forming into platoons and everything. We go to the field. I get issued night vision and a laser, and I'm like, this is awesome. I thought only like SOCOM got this
Yeah.
stuff. Like,
So dude, you're living that Force Recon lifestyle without
I was,
even you're like, I'm high tech, baby.
yeah, hell, I was like, I didn't realize that like Marine Corps was so high speed. Like, we really are elite. Like, this is cool. Go to the field for the first time and being a dumb boot, like not knowing to check my equipment, like not knowing I can't just trust the people inside the armory. There was no battery cap for my night vision. So I could not use my night vision. And I had to go to my fire team leader and be like, I don't have a battery cap and I don't know how to fix this. Like, I
Oh, and I'm
can't just
sure it
like
was
hold
your fault, dude. Like
battery in because it needs something to make the circuit connection. And so I was like, well, this is not a good start. But I ended up becoming a fire team leader shortly after that. Um, and still like no idea how to lead. Like, I like the idea of being a fire team leader because you know everything in boot camp was like, oh, you need rank and title. Everything's about rank and title, rank and title.
right.
You gain rank and or you're gaining title. I'm like, well, I can't gain rank because I'm a PFC, but I got title. I'm a fire team leader. But then, of course, all the senior guys who are fire team leaders look down on you
Oh yeah.
because to them, they worked to get there because they all did a deployment. So, like, they worked to get there. And to them, like, I was just handed it, which essentially I was. So there was no mentorship, you know, really had no idea how to lead and no one was helping. And it was just like every man for himself, just not a good environment to learn how to be a leader.
Right.
Um,
Well, and that's
so
an
I kind of
important.
dove into,
Sorry, I was just gonna say that's an important thing to hit on because, um, maybe not in the leadership aspect of things, but the realm of preparedness and like training and being able to properly relay that column of files and the message on the things that you should be proficient with before you guys are getting ready to, ultimately go invade another country. And obviously that plays a factor in what you're doing today. So, we don't want to hit on that, but I'm for people to, keep that in mind that this relative experience of what you've had to go through and how it's like not meeting those standards, um, you know, comes back full circle to what Blake's doing today, which is pretty important. But you go through that workup process. So basically, you got a whole year. Throughout that year until March of 2003, what kind of stuff are you guys like? Did you guys go to CAX or Mojave Viper at that point in time?
yeah. So back then it was still CAX. Uh, so yeah, by the time we go to CAX in October of 2002, we done squad operations, platoon operations, um, and at that point we're working on company level stuff to get ready for CAX. So going to CAX, it's all platoon company level. Um, we actually got pulled out of CAX early. We left early because somebody was like, "Hey, there's a warning order, and like we might be deploying early to go somewhere." And we're like, "Really? Like, are we gonna do this?" And they're like, "Yeah, we're leaving early to like go to get ready for it." Which we did. We left CAX early, but then nothing came of it, and the whole rumor just like completely dissipated, and people like to stop talking about it. So I don't even remember what it was, but it was something about, hey, we might be deploying, which may have just been complete nonsense. It may have been some other reason that we left early, but we did. Uh, Kind of kept going through the normal MEU workup. We were supposed to go on the 31st MEU, UDP to Okinawa. Um, we finished that up. Our pre-deployment leave, lined up with the Christmas holidays. So we all, went home for Christmas leave. Um, and at that point, we'd had a few leave blocks, and I learned that you usually need a vacation from your vacation. So I had started to come home, or not come home. I started to come back to base like a day or two before the leave block would end. So I'd have like a day or two kind of to myself and like, empty barracks to like get ready for it. So I flew back on New Year's Day, get in that night. And the day after, I think it was like January 3rd or something that year that everyone was coming back. I go see one of my guys who was on restriction, and he starts saying how we're supposed to go get our gear back and we're going to be deploying to Kuwait. And I'm like, no, dude, you're getting confused. Like, we're going to Okinawa. We spent the whole workup um, pretending to fight Iraqi units. This was back when apparently it was kosher to do so. Now we fight make believe nations and armies and insurgents. But that workup, we were pretending to fight real world Iraqi units. And there were always rumors, like the thing that happened in Cox, and there were other rumors like throughout that whole year that like, oh, we might be deploying, like this might be a real world mission we're going to go do. We need to be prepared to do this real world mission. But nothing ever came of it. So by the time he's saying like, oh yeah, we're going to stage in Kuwait to invade Iraq, it's like, no, like not gonna happen. But he actually somehow was like tied into the Lance Corporal
That was
Underground, through the word, and yeah, the company, everybody came back from leave, and the company commander gathered us in one of the battalion classrooms, and he's like, "This is what's happening. What we know right now." He's like, "We have our window of when we're going to fly out to Kuwait, um, and we're going to stage. Like, we don't know for sure if and when we're actually going to invade Iraq, but like, hey, on this date, you're gonna get issued your tap gear, so you get your desert camis and desert boots and boonie cover and all this other stuff.
was this
Issuing
the
sappy.
sorry, was this the initial, so is this the first time, are you still in like M81 Woodland black boot style uniform, and then this is like Desert Digi is Marpat's getting handed to you, or are you guys getting tricolor?
We got Yeah, we got tricolors for the
Okay,
invasion.
okay.
So we got our DCUs, the three color deserts, the boonie covers. We got our desert boots. Yeah, and they were like, hey, go get name tapes put on your camis. So it was like, now it's like a scramble to go get name tapes put on the camis. They decided that we were going to focus a lot more on urban. So we did a few weeks of urban training, and then there were just weeks of like constant gear inspections and backyard training. So like not going out formally in any ranges. It was just like going through all of your SOPs, all of your battle drills, like again and again and again and again, down in the creek bed behind the camp. And then gear inspection after gear inspection after gear inspection after gear inspection, just ad nauseum gear inspections. Uh, and then, wills and powers of attorney and all the admin stuff, and getting it all done. Finally, hey, like this is when we're flying out. Pack your rooms up, everything gets put in storage, and we go to March Air Force Base in California, and we fly out.
Yep. So what does that like, as this point in time, you're probably what, like 19 years old or something, maybe 20?
Uh, 19.
19. Okay. So 19-year-old kid, you've hugged mom and dad one last time. You're getting ready to fly out to go to Kuwait in lieu of invading another country. What kind of, I mean, are you even comprehending what you're about to get into, or is it like, are you have your head on your shoulders in the sense of you being like a small unit leader now as a, fire team leader, going into it with the mindset of, oh shit, I'm not prepared enough, or I think I have this under control.
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. Uh, we didn't get a lot of time shooting and definitely no marksmanship training. Like there was nothing where we went to a range and we would shoot and somebody'd be like, hey, this is what you need to do to be better. Like do this. And you shoot again. And they're like, hey, see, I know you're better. Like keep doing that. Now change this and like making you better. It was just, squad attack ranges, platoon attack ranges, and it was just put rounds down range and accuracy by volume. And if you finally like got dialed in on a target, you would kind of just keep like shooting that same plastic Ivan target that would keep bobbing up and down every time it got, 3 hits. So I didn't have the greatest confidence uh, in my marksmanship at that point. Like I had reasonable confidence because again, I grew up shooting and I knew I was an okay shooter. Um, I didn't have confidence in my ability to clear rooms and really do the urban fighting. I was really interested in it, but I knew the tactics that we had didn't fully make sense to me. And again, I still didn't have any real mentorship in how to become a leader. At this point, I'm now a non-commissioned officer. I've been meritoriously promoted to corporal, but again, meritoriously promoted to corporal. So all the other corporals, whether they were meritoriously promoted, a year before me, or they just got it by time and service, time and grade, all just chalk shit to me. Like no
Right.
one wanted to help out, right? Everyone else is like, I worked for this, you didn't. And so I still chassis and uh I was well on my way. I was the gear guy. Like that started like immediately, hitting the fleet. I was like always looking for like better kit, first guy with a 3-point sling and first guy the subload. It's like, oh, you're just the guy that has all the gear and you
Yeah.
don't have any skills. And
Well,
I was like,
did,
no, I'm
did
just everybody else.
did you have the access to like, I mean, I guess at that point in time, what was it? Probably Blackhawk was one of the only companies that was out there really putting out alternate gear. I have one of their like one of my squad leaders had given it to me. One of their like original chest rigs. It's like essentially what the Marine Corps had adapted into that one that they brought, like you put like 8 mags and it's obviously got all the molly on front and like a H harness that runs through the back. But I don't think sorry, but yeah, Blackhawk, that's probably one of the only things that was out there at this point in time.
Blackhawk, and there's a company, they're still out there, Special Operations Equipment, and now they're original Special Operations Equipment. I think they're out of Kentucky now or Tennessee or something like that. Um, they had a shop in California at the time, right outside base. So it was like you go there, and they had their stuff, and then there was the local, Army Navy surplus store that carried some of their gear. And then it was the Blackhawk catalog. So actually, that Christmas of 2002, I'd phoned ahead and I had the catalog and I told my family because they were asked like, "What do you want for Christmas?" And I asked for stuff out of the Blackhawk catalog. And so my Christmas gifts was just a slew of stuff. Again, no idea that I'm
You're,
about to be deployed to combat. I think I'm going to Okinawa, Japan, and I'm going to be on boats and everything. And so I get all this brand new kit and I bring it back and I'm setting it up. And in that brief, the company commander be like, "Hey, I don't want any of you going out and buying new gear." I very specifically, he said, no hatchets on your deuce gear. I very specifically remember him saying that. Um, but I was like, well, I already had this. So I just started wearing it. And we were doing some of our urban training, and my lieutenant calls me out like over the he like doesn't even talk to me like on the side. He just straight up calls me out over to the company commander, which maybe the CO saw it first. And he was like, Corporal Flannery, report to the CO. And the CO is like, didn't I say don't? I'm like, well, in my defense, sir, this was all a Christmas gift. Like all of this, either I paid for or my family bought for me for Christmas. So I already had this put together and set up before I even came back to California from Connecticut. So I am actually not disobeying your order because I already had this. And he
Oh
was like,
man.
he was like, fair enough, fair enough. He's like, and again, I was that guy. I was already known as that guy with, it always had like something new, high speed. Uh, so they let it slide. The only thing was when we got to Kuwait, I had to wear the same, Mali fighting load carrier as everybody else while we were in Kuwait. But whenever we went forward to the assembly area, I was allowed to wear my rig, which is probably the same rig. It was the Black Hawk um, Ranger Assault Carrying Kit. So it was the
Was it split
chest rig,
chest? Was it split chest or was it all one piece?
solid piece with a bib. Um, I had like 15 rifle mags, 4 frags, 8 HEDP, 2 quarts of water, utility pouch, no IFAC.
So it was
Our
that something that
IFACs
you
were
guys had not, yeah, I was gonna say, okay, sorry, go ahead.
on our assault packs, and back then the IFAC was still this little plastic box, like 2 inches wide, 4 inches high, 4 inches tall, like crappy plastic box in an old crappy nylon pouch. They were always cracked because they weren't durable whatsoever, and they had like 2 small pressure bandages, 1 or 2 cravats, iodine tablets, I think some band-aids. I'd never seen a full one. We got full ones as we were getting ready to deploy. Like my whole workup, my IFAC only ever had like one item in it. Like we did live fire ranges
With
with
no
no
medical
medical gear.
gear. Jeez. Your corpsman's probably just like sitting in a Humvee, just like not no med bag, like an IV for the hungover staff sergeant or some shit.
The back then, which so it's not completely false, but they're like you don't want to use tourniquets, which is slightly true. The tourniquet is technically your last resort in bleeding control. However, circumstances may dictate it's still the first method you use, which is common knowledge now. Like you tell anybody else, hey,
Yeah,
you seen a massive bleed on extremity, you put a tourniquet on, and a 5-year-old would agree with you.
yeah.
But then they were like, no, like don't use it because if you put a tourniquet on your buddy's limb, he's gonna lose his limb. You want to be the one responsible for your buddy losing his limb, and the logic
Oh
of,
my,
of I don't want him to die. And some of us, and I kind of like went in and out of this camp myself, like, dude, if I lose a limb, just kill
fucking
me.
kill me, yeah.
Guys are trying to make pacts like that. Like, dude, if I lose a limb, just kill me. I,
So
I don't want to go through life.
what was your fucking SOP then on like establishing like triage and like just packing wounds, like stuffing your fucking hands into some like how did that work?
Put a pressure dressing on it.
Jeez, dude, that is
No matter how
insane.
many pressure dress, how many times we prac apt putting pressure dressings on guys for that year-long workup? Big
Zero
old goose egg.
times.
Our medical training was nothing more than lectures by the corpsman. And if there was any like hands-on practical application, you weren't held to it. It was like, hey, here's some stuff up here. And inside the big battalion classroom, like the companies just kind of meandering around. Some of the guys go up, and I'm like, oh, that's fucking stupid. Like it's just like we did it in boot camp. You just put the thing on, you tie it around, it's easy. Like let's go do something we don't do very well. Like let's go shoot her, let's go patrol.
That's
So yeah,
crazy to think about that. And even then, like, I don't know, did you guys do live tissue? Did anybody do live tissue back then, or did that not come on until really the GWAT?
so right before we left, we did send one guy per squad uh to a combat lifesaver course. So one guy per squad went to this like I think it was like a 1 week or 2 week long combat lifesaver course. It was not live tissue, but they came back and they weren't given aid bags. They just had more knowledge. but they weren't given like additional resources to really do anything with that. Um, I think at some point maybe some aid bags came out. They're like, hey, if you're like the squad, like here's this little aid bag, but really like nothing. And there was no sustainment beyond that. So like by the time we were crossing the line of departure into Iraq, that that course was a month old. Guys go from like no medical training, 2 week class, no medical training. Like there was no sustainment on any of those skills that they learned. Uh,
Jeez,
so yeah, it was
that's wild, dude, to think about that in the sense of talk about not being prepared. And I think most people that if they've, known their senior leadership, like guys in my age group or era, if you will, after, the initial OIF stuff, like what you guys were tasked to do with the like obviously you're telling me I didn't know anything. I figured medical equipment or medical gear would have been, top priority thinking about going into a combat situation, but soft skin Humvees, guys not having proper equipment or like getting like a flak jacket or like an interceptor that the plates don't fit. I listened to a story that this guy told earlier. He said that all the interceptors or the flak jackets that these guys were getting were either a size too big or a size too small, and some plates would fit, some plates wouldn't fit. And it's like, just to think of going into something just under equipped and just being able to do what you guys had did is pretty freaking wild.
we didn't even get SAPI plates until we were like deploying. They issued us because before then you only got SAPI plates on a temporary basis. So if you were going to do a live fire and maneuver, um, and I don't know who all the audience is for the podcast, but for anybody in the military, especially combat arms, there's fire and movement, and there's fire and maneuver. So back then, if you're just doing fire and movement, so hey, just squads online, I'm up, they see me, I'm down. There's no support by fire, there's none of that. Then you didn't need plates. But the second you incorporated a support by fire and turn it into a fire and maneuver range, everybody had to wear SAPI plates. So
Wow,
like
that's
did that for like
holy
in the field. We did a the ranges, so we all had SAPI plates for like those 2 weeks, and we're like, oh, this sucks. This sucks, man. And it's super uncomfortable to wear under a pack. Like these things are so heavy. Uh, and then we got them in for CACs, and we were getting ready for CACs, and the seniors were like coming up and like punching us, and I'm like, what the hell? And they're like, well, fucking some guys just shove cardboard in the plate pocket instead of the real SAPI plate, so they don't have to carry the weight. And I was like, man, that's stupid. What if you take a hit? They're like, well, that's why we're checking to make sure everyone's got, their actual SAPI plates in.
wow.
Um, yeah, it wasn't until then that like hard armor became standard issue. It was like, okay, like people need to be training in this all the time.
Right.
Um, yeah, I mean, we had a guy, going back to that medical thing, we had a guy in Baghdad who almost bled out because he got shot through the forearm and no one knew how to stop the bleeding. Uh, they finally got it stopped, but like the dude almost bled out because no one knew how to stop the bleeding because we'd never been trained on it. So, yeah, like I felt confident in certain areas. I felt confident I would perform. I didn't think I would be a guy that would like freeze up or anything like that. Um, I felt confident that I could do well enough that I could lead by example, and that me like pushing the fight, my guys would push the fight with me. But I didn't have like a really good idea of like how to actually direct my fire team in a dynamic situation.
Oh yeah,
If it's get
especially
on
sorry. I was just
if it's get online and rush forward, okay, I understand that. Like that's easy. I can make my fire team shift, and things like that. But again, like going to something more urban where it's dynamic and reading it and tasking, no idea. Like no real idea how to So it was definitely kind of a mixed bag going into it, but I was like, let's just get into this and, let's just start stacking bodies and we'll make it work. Like we'll
Trial by
figure it
fire,
out.
dude. Trial by fire. You're just gonna hit the ground running. Hit the ground running. Um, so that preparation and like having the mindset of, it being as ill-equipped and properly prepared as possible, in what you guys were given and the knowledge that you had, the experience that you had. March 19th rolls around and you guys are sitting there on that you know, in that ready position, ready to push friendly lines, depart friendly lines. What was that? Are you guys tracks, 7 tons, Humvees? How was that, movement for you guys?
Yeah, we were in amphibious assault vehicles. We the tracks. Um, and so the one thing we did a whole lot of though, which made it that one aspect easier, was the Seaburn training. Back then we called it NBC, but the Seaburn training. We were always doing hikes and gas masks and attacks and gas masks, and we do hikes and things in full mop gear, like everything but the boots and the gloves. Constantly doing like the decon, like putting everything on, and then mimicking like wiping yourself with charcoal, taking off your mop suit, getting a brand new one, and you're like company gunnies walking around, leaderships walk around. If like you fuck it up, they do like a quick man down drill and they yell at you. So like we were definitely well conditioned and we definitely knew our Seaburn stuff like really well. So that was where I was confident. Um, but there we are in the assembly area and we're mopped up. Like we have the chemical protective overgarment suits on, we've got the overboots on, we've got our gloves are in our pockets and our masks are with us. And then Saddam launches some scuds. So like we have to go to full mop, get inside the Amtrak, and we're sitting there like not knowing where these things are going. So of course you immediately presume that the scud
It's gonna hit
right
you.
on top
Yeah.
of your vehicle.
Oh, but you know what the fucked up thing though is like I shouldn't say I'm trying to do my best to is that some guys probably did think that and like whether it was an RPG or a mortar or a rocket or something, and they did. I mean, especially in the tracks, there's some pretty wild instances of that happening. I'm sure you've been there for some of those, but what you guys are buttoned up on these tracks, possibility of a scud hitting you, or you're sitting there with your gas mask on, and then you guys make the push into Iraq. So, what's that like?
So initially, it was like you said, like we were completely buttoned up. They wanted to button everything up because everyone was convinced that we would get hit with chemical weapons. When we went in, so like, well, if all the tracks are buttoned up, that's an extra layer of protection and gives everybody an extra like little bit to get their masks on and get hoods up and everything set. So we traveled that way for the first couple hours, it seemed. Um, in the back of the track, there's that squawk box where you can hear the radio chatter of like whatever the vehicle commander is listening to, and it just sounds like chaos. Like fog of war, and that fog of war where like there's so much uncertainty and no one really knows what's going on, and no one's had to coordinate a movement like this before, and it just sounds like everyone's a little bit lost. Everyone's having a really hard time seeing. One guy's like, I see a tank in front of me. Can I shoot it? And then we all yell at the intercom, like, yes, shoot the tank. Like, even if you're shooting at it with 50 cal and 40 mic, like that's something.
Yeah.
It's shoot the tank. And then we're like, great, we're gonna get blown up by a friggin' tank, having no chance to ever actually get into combat, right? We're all thinking like watching Saving Private Ryan, where the boats are landing on the beach and dudes are just getting annihilated by machine guns before they can even disembark from the boats. And we're like, that's where we are right now. But instead of a boat, it's an Amtrak. And instead of a machine gun, it's going to be a friggin' T-34 that's going to clean our clocks. But at some point, our lieutenant was like, hey, open up the hatch. One side was just totally covered in equipment. So we can only open up the left side hatch. And I immediately was like, I'm climbing all the way out. Like, one, I had never been claustrophobic before, but being buttoned up in an Amtrak and all of that NBC gear, I was starting it just a little bit. So like open that hatch up. I climbed out all the way on top and I'm just looking out and it was just incredibly surreal because it seemed like all the oil wells were on fire and then there were like fires on the horizon. Uh just very surreal. And at that point, I think it was like 4 a.m. So the sky is like purplish between, the sun starting to creep towards the horizon and the fires and everything.
That's wild.
Very surreal. Yeah, very surreal. Um, Cold. It was not warm. March in Iraq at night, hauling ass down a highway on an AAV. And yeah, we were rolling towards our first objective, and I kept trying to like holler down whenever I'd hear traffic over the squawk box, like trying, stay informed and trying to figure out like what's the best way for me to face. Like I don't know where the contact's going to come from, but like at any minute, like all hell's going to open up. Uh, at one point we started actually closing on our first objective. They shot at us with a 57-2. It's a 57 millimeter
Recoilless,
anti-aircraft gun.
yeah, recoilless rifle, right? Or is it a recoilless rifle or is it in the back of a truck like the
Oh, so the 57-2 is an actual AA gun. Um, it's two barrels. Each one is 57 millimeters. So that's why we call it the 57-2. I don't know what you
Okay,
would call
okay.
it. But you know, they can level the guns and fire at ground targets as well. So they shot at us with that. And I just remember seeing this like huge tracer like fly over. Like it wasn't all that close. It was like 30, 40 feet over us. But I was like, man, it's like something out of Star Wars because they were so far away. Because of the range on those things, they were so far away, and the thing comes out. It was like a scene from Star Wars where like you see the destroyer like way off in the distance, and the Empire is like shooting from a Star Destroyer way off in the distance, and you're in the view of the Millennium Falcon with like this big red laser bolt going over the Falcon. I was like,
That
whoa,
yeah, that's a good
that was
way
a
to describe
huge
it.
bullet. That was kind of cool.
Did,
That's when I
did
was like,
at that point
man,
did it start to like
they're
set
actually
in? Yeah, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Did that point you start to let it sit in? We're like, this is, you know, like that. I'm trying to picture that moment of you climbing out of the track and looking like oh my God, I'm dying for air. I need to get out of here. And then immediately your mindset shifts to just holy shit, like like the oil fields are burning. I'm sure that there's probably some, bombs being carpet bombs dropped in the background, or like as you guys are getting closer, that whole picture starts to become real. And then on top of that, now as you're getting, towards your objective, rounds are actually coming overhead. So it's like all these culminating things to it's, obviously going to get to the point where you dismount and get to it.
yeah. And we closed in, and we'd rehearsed it time and time and time again. But now, like I'm stuck up on top, and I didn't want to drop in because I have a loaded rifle and a loaded 203. So like if I drop in, my gun's gonna be pointed down into the track and I'll be flagging dudes. Like I can't do that. And I didn't know how to like drop in while keeping it pointed up. I was like, screwed, I'll just jump over the side. As they drop the ramp, I'll jump over the side because my fire team is the first out and it'll be fine. But when I went to like kind of hop over the side, I don't know, my gas mask or something caught. And instead of like landing on my feet, I landed flat on my back. Took the wind out of me.
Mhm.
I don't think I lost consciousness, but it definitely took the wind out of me. And my squad leader gets off and he's like, "What the hell are you doing down there?" I was like, I fell.
Oh, that's
Get up.
I'm sure you got did they let you forget did they not let you forget that for a while?
Most guys didn't even
Okay, okay.
but it didn't even register. And we got up and we start going and we're like we didn't immediately make contact and I'm like trying to get my guys to like get their dispersion and get reset and I'm like when's it gonna start? When's it gonna start? Like we're supposed to be fighting, an entrenched position. Like there's supposed to be trenches and fighting positions here and like when's the shooting gonna start? Like what's going on? And then somebody made the call that we had never heard before, which was to cover and move. So instead of like I'm up, they see me, I'm down, and like dropping in the prone, it was actually just move up and get into a knee, and it was still rushing, but no one's shooting, and we're just going to a knee. And I'm like, okay, like, all right, here we go. Any second now. And we're all worried about like mines because that was a big thing Iraqi army did was like do a lot of mining. And then my saw gunner lost his friggin' overboot. And so I have to like send him back. And I'm like trying to figure out like, do I keep up with the platoon or do I have my guy stop and put his boot back on because he's gonna die of nerve agent if I don't get the boot back on him. I'm like, this is a horrible start to my combat experience. Like I'm the one fire team leader who has a saw gunner missing his friggin' overboot.
You're like, come on, we're gonna miss the damn invasion. Let's go.
Like, uh, and it was like nothing's happening, and nothing's happening, and nothing's happening. I'm like, this is going to like just pop off any second. And then we come up on the buildings, and a lot of the construction, and I don't know if you did you ever go to Iraq or Afghan?
No, just Afghan.
So in Iraq, I don't know if it's similar, but in Iraq, they tend to like build everything like a U-shaped building or like almost like an enclosed C shape, and then all like the doors for all the spaces are inside of it. So it's like a courtyard, because it's kind of like a defensive thing.
Yeah, like there's I've seen that like it's like a gate, you got like your compound surrounding it, and then you make entry to the gate, and then you'll have like your access points to, actually get
Yeah,
into the homes or whatever.
was it a gate or in this case it was just like an opening. Uh, it was maybe like 20 feet wide, and then a big courtyard. I mean, the courtyard was probably like 50 yards by 50 yards, and just doors all the way around it. And our training was every door needed a gun on it. So I start calling for support. I'm like, there's like 40 doors here. Like, I can't clear this with a fire team. That's too many doors. The training was like literally, I need a gun on every single door to start clearing. That was like the tactic. And my sweater's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I need support. Like, I need security in all these doors to start clearing. He's like, just start clearing. There's no one available for that. Just start clearing. I'm like, okay, like that's not how we were trained. And now I'm really confused. And now I'm also really nervous because we were told, if you don't have security in every door, you're going to get shot in the back. Like you're going to die. You're going to get killed in the streets. And so we just start making entry into these rooms and just like room after room of like little, you know, camp stoves and candles still lit. And
All right,
like
hold
they
on one
were,
second. Hold on. I gotta ask you, when this is happening and your squad leader tells you just start clearing, um, what's going through your head as you go up to breach that for like you boot it in or whatever you guys did to make entry on that first door? Like this is your first, I guess, like direct action or like it's essentially going to be putting you into a situation where you might have to utilize your weapon system, right? Like how are you even thinking about it? You're just like, fuck it, go. Like you guys on me, make entry and start clearing. Or do you specifically remember like that first door that you went in?
not specifically. I just remember being convinced that's where I was going to get shot. Like, I'm going to get killed because this is not how we train. This is not how it's supposed to be. This doesn't make sense because at the same time, I'm understanding this is not how we train. We train that you have to have security in every door. But then it also didn't make sense that you would need the whole platoon to be here to clear this simultaneously. And I'm trying to like actually work this out while I'm still trying to figure out how to get into all these rooms and make entry. And again, our room clearing stuff was like very kind of ad hoc. Like it was just like, hey, go do it. And this is the flavor of the week of how we're supposed to clear a room. And the guys who come in from security forces would be like, no, like do it this way. So I'm just making entry the best way I can figure out every time, trying to keep the saw gunner out of the mix because you don't want the open bolt weapon to be going in like 1 or 2 man.
Right.
So reorganize the stack so that way it's rifles going in first, and then balancing like I don't want to push my guys in ahead of me, but I also don't want to be the 1 man on every door because it doesn't feel right. Uh, we came to one door that was in a corner, and I remember this one very specifically because it was the first one that was locked. And I was like, oh shit, they're all in there. The door's locked. They're all in there. They're all in there. Like we've already passed like 15 doors. And again, lit candles, steaming cups of tea, stove still burning, cigarettes still smoking. Like they've just been here and they're all in this room. Like they decided to hide in this room. We're going to do something and we're just going to be met by like 20 dudes pointing AKs at us. Like crap. And I'm trying to like open the door, but it's locked. And I try kicking it and it doesn't budge. And I tried calling for support again. And my sister's like, what do you need? I'm like, I got a locked door. Like, he's like, just kick it in. It's not working. So I try kicking it again. And the corner of the door actually like peels in. I'm like, crap. Well, I can't get the door open. So I might as well like look inside. And I'm like, this is where I get shot in the face. And, I look inside and I don't have a weapon light. I don't have a handheld flashlight. I've got a mag light somewhere in my gear. And I just kind of look inside. I remember seeing like stacks of, what looked like ammo boxes. As like, I think it's clear, like just move on to the next door. And, we just kept clearing and all the other rooms were unlocked. And I went back and I'm like, hey, that one locked room, like, I'm pretty sure that's full of ammo. We should probably do something about it. And they're like, no, it's nothing. Forget it. I'm like, I'm pretty sure someone should go back and take another look at that. I'm pretty sure it's full of ammo and it should be destroyed. Like, pretty sure it should be destroyed. And everyone's like, no. Like, we're moving on. I'm like, all right, whatever. Like, not my call. But yeah, like there was no kinetic action at all. All the fighting that we had been built up to expect uh just didn't happen. And we pushed all the way to the limit of advance, and this whole thing, we'd rehearsed this attack so many times because this was like the one thing we knew was going to happen for sure. This was our first mission, taking this gas oil separation plant. And we're online and they're like, hey, it's time to roll up, like mount the tracks. And instead of performing the coordinated and rehearsed method of like peeling back to the tracks, it was just like everyone just got up, started running to the track. Because like the sooner we get in the tracks, the sooner we get to the next spot, like let's go get in a fight. We're also like, let's go get in this fight we've been promised. Like we've been training for this, we've been working up for this, we've been, baited into this. Let's go get this. And then a couple of trucks come driving down the road and everyone just piles out. Once again, totally ignoring our rehearsed and thought out SOP. Everyone just piles back out and just finds a spot. And then everyone just starts shooting. I didn't realize that the trucks had guys that were shooting, but they're coming from my right, and the squad that's furthest to the right is opening up on the truck. So it's like, all right, well, if everybody else is shooting, I'm shooting too. And I'm standing there looking down the road right by the front of the Amtrak. and I'm waiting for them to come into what I know is like my sector. And I was like, I could step out and I could probably hit it, like, because I have now, well, on flight. I'm like looking down the road. I'm like, I could just shoot it with a 203. But again, I've not shot my 203 except maybe a handful of Cheeto rounds. So I'm not really certain what would happen if I shoot HEDP, and what would, if like the guys who are like 10 meters off the road, if they're going to be safe. So I don't shoot any 40 mic. I wait for it to come to my sector so I can shoot my rifle. And one of my guys is tugging on my sleeve. He's like, Corporal Flannery, get down. Corporal Flannery, get down. I'm like, dude, get dispersion. And he comes back and he's tugging on my sleeve, like, Corporal Flannery, get down. I'm like, dude, get the fuck off me. Go get dispersion. Because he heard the gunfire and he kept trying to get me to get down, but I was just standing there. And as they came to my sector, I shoot my rifle. I started shooting at the engine block, and then I tried shooting at the driver. Um, and just like trying to put rounds in the truck. Like I don't really know where to shoot, and the driver was ducking, so I couldn't see much. And just put rounds in the truck, and then I realized like okay, it's like leaving my sector, so I stopped shooting. And then like there's still guys to my right who are still like clearly shooting down the road, and I'm like, I can see his fire. Like what the hell's going on? And I look over, and the lieutenant's on the ground. Uh, so Lieutenant Childers had taken a round, and it entered right under the SAPI plate. So it entered right under the SAPI plate, and they think that because of how the interceptor vests were cut, because they covered so much. So when you bring like a rifle up to shoulder it, it kind of lifts the vest up.
Yes.
So it entered right underneath his SAPI plate. Uh, I remember something about it, potentially lodging in his spine. I don't know if it hit the descending aorta, but he essentially bled out internally. There was nothing that our corpsmen were capable of doing for him right then and there. But I see him go down, and people start shouting like "Lieutenant's down," and I'm like, "Oh shit!" But I didn't know what to do, and he already had like a fire team around him. So like me going over there, that's not going to solve anything. So I immediately go start checking on my guys, and then I have to start walking the line to check other guys. And they're like, what's going on? I'm like, the lieutenant's been shot. And then the rumor started circulating that it was one of us. Like, because it was so disorganized, everybody thought that it had been one of us who had accidentally shot the lieutenant. Um, so that did not help,
Yeah, dude.
whatsoever. Like that,
Even with
uh,
morale and just like the, one of not being able to not being able to figure that out on the spot, and then having that doubt between the other units. Um, sorry, she drew me a picture. Here, this is my daughter just painted this for me, so I got that. Beautiful. But with that lieutenant going down, like the morale of the troops, like that, unfortunately being the first casualty that you guys take, what it seems like in the invasion of Iraq. And then, now you've got the distrust from possibly other squads or some of the other platoons or something with, hey, these guys like, just killed their platoon commander or something on accident. So that's got to be pretty unfortunate and disheartening. And when I'm listening to all these things, like you guys were the ones who paved the like paved the road for Marines like myself, like down the future. Like you guys suffered with like the gear that was ill set for this environment, and like unequipped for the training that you guys didn't get, the medical and just like the mount stuff. Like it was mount even a thing when you guys were before this deployment, or was it? Oh, okay,
yeah,
but it was like a very, very
for a
like
while.
base of an understanding of it. But uh you guys sacrificed in all those areas. Um, you know, to put Marines and soldiers, like everybody obviously learns from all these discrepancies in the way things were conducted initially. But when I hear you explaining all these things, that it's all correlating to, I mean, what you're doing today in the sense of, like gear wise, like being, having your kit set up properly, being fundamentally sound and competent, and then obviously like the medical stuff on that, the communication, just even directing, with just your voice, like not being on comms or like hand and arm signals and stuff, but being able to properly relay the message, and like coordinate your guys. I mean, it's all like you did what you're doing now because of these things that you experienced on this first deployment of yours.
Yeah, this first one was incredibly formative in all that, and this one and the second one too. But this really started was like just not prepared, and there's a lot of like you don't know what you don't know until you're in it. And even the simple things like baby wipes, we all learned baby wipes, which now would be common knowledge. Like no, like almost no one goes to field without baby wipes, but none of us did. Like that wasn't a thing. You didn't take any kind of baby wipes to the field or hand sanitizer or anything to clean yourself because, well, you're only going to go to the field for a week. You're going to be there, Monday through Friday. And if there's a few times where you go out longer than that, it's like, screw it. Like, who cares? You're just in the field. You're supposed to be dirty. You come out of the field in a week or two, maybe three, and then, the company is going to bring by hot chow at some point, and, there's going to be little admin periods where everything's going to be okay. And, you know, maybe they'll even bring out a fresh pair of socks for everybody. Like it was in this that we realized like just how austere of an environment this was really going to be. Um, and yeah, I mean, we lose Lieutenant Childers. He has the unfortunate distinction of being the first KIA of Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Wow.
Uh, we were the main effort for the company. And with Lieutenant Childers' death, uh, our platoon sergeant got moved up to platoon commander. My squad leader got moved up to platoon sergeant, and then there was another fire team leader who's you know a good handful of months senior to me, so he got moved up to squad leader. And then because we lost Lieutenant Childers, who was a big reason of why we were the main effort for the company, we also lose being the main effort for the company. And anybody who's been in the infantry knows that like being the main effort of your company, being the main effort squad for your platoon, like that's bragging rights. Like that's a pretty big deal. It's fairly significant to you. It seems kind of trivial, but like it's something. And to lose that on top of losing our lieutenant, it was like, fuck, man, like we're just gonna be, we're gonna be the guys on the outside now. Like now, third platoon's the main effort. They're gonna get to do all the fighting, and we're just gonna be off, in a support by fire position or security position somewhere. So like now we're not even gonna get to experience the war. And it's just this weird, thinking. It's like someone just got killed, but you're still worried you're not going to experience the war. Uh, it's just very, very weird. And there was a bunch of blood on the ramp of the track, and I was like, hey, we should probably wash that off. And someone's like, with what? Like, all the water we have is for drinking. And I'm like, well, can't we spare some of it? Like, we can get resupplied, you know? Uh, One other guy got wounded, stepped on something that blew up, kind of like $1 million wound. It like shredded his boots, and it broke like all the bones in his foot and like in his ankle. But he kept all of his appendages. Like I don't think he even suffered like any major lacerations. So he got, lucky in a
Very
sense with
lucky.
that. Um, so he got medevac. I remember I went over to the medevac track and I talked for him for like a couple minutes, see how he was like, and we held like a quick, I guess he called it a quick ceremony for the lieutenant, and that's where guys like started to break down. Uh, and seeing the rest of you know Marines who were senior to me that I looked up to because they had experienced more of life and more of the Marine Corps, and they had deployed and they were squad leaders and other fire team leaders, and then even like my peers and all these guys were like, always constant hard asses and like trying to fight each other to prove stuff are now like bawling. And it got me a little choked up, but I was like, I gotta hold it back, and I have to like. I told myself that I have to stay strong for my guys. Like if they look to me, I should not be sobbing. I should be dry eyed and stoic because we've got work to do. Uh, and then kind of started getting ready. Wearing mop boots, feet sweat like crazy. So my socks are soaked. So I got to change my socks. And thinking I still had, plenty of socks, I realized I only have like two more clean pairs of socks left out of all the socks I packed because I just started changing them in the assembly area. I was like, change socks. Like I'll be able to wash them. Uh, and then I realized like I've got two more pairs of clean socks. I have no idea when I'm going to be able to wash these other socks. I don't even know how I'm going to wash these other socks. Like I have a vague notion of what I'll do. I don't really know how I'm going to do it. I don't know when I'm going to be able to. And after this pair I'm putting on right now, I've got two more pairs of clean socks for I don't know how long. Like I have no idea how long this is going to take. It could be quick, like Desert Storm, and we could be done in a few days, or we could be here for a year. I'm like, I have no idea. And that silly little moment of like realizing I don't have enough socks was like my first moment of fear of the day. Was socks.
That's
Not
crazy. I think, yeah,
shot at by, anti-aircraft guns, not suddenly realizing I have been getting shot at by AKs and, was a couple of feet from taking around myself. There was no fear when the lieutenant went down. There was sadness, but no fear. It was socks
yeah.
that actually got. That was my truly true first like oh shit moment. Like even though when I had to clear all those doors and I was like, oh, I'm gonna get shot, but that was more of like anger and frustration. Like I'm gonna get fucking shot. It's somebody else's fault, and this is bullshit. But now it's like shit, sucks.
Yeah, I think most people, when they hear that, they'd be like, is this guy crazy or something? But most Marines that have spent time in the field or understand this, what happens to your feet if you don't take care of them. And you're like, oh shit, like I don't have enough socks to last me the rest of whatever I think this invasion is going to be or this war is going to be. Um, yeah, that's not like that or not having any more Chili Mac MREs, and you're like, dude, what the this is bullshit. Not happening. But you guys go from this point where you just lost an officer. You're now probably gonna get moved to some security element. You guys aren't the main effort for your company. So what's the next step in this mission? You guys load back up in the tracks after knowing that, like, oh shit, can't watch. Did you guys end up washing that blood off the track ramp or no?
Yeah, it did get washed off. Because I mean it was pretty thick. So I think the company gunny came by and said the same thing after I had like 10, 20 minutes later. Of course, company gunny says it, so it gets done. You know, corporal says it. It's like, oh, fuck you, corporal.
Right.
Uh, so it did get washed off. And yeah, we loaded up. We moved to another gas oil separation plant, and I think we were supposed to be. So this is the problem. Is after this, I have no idea what's going on, and
And the reason why is because you guys have only really trained up to that last point, that limit of advance where you guys got to.
like we did all this like rehearsals for that specific attack, and we'd been given like the strategic overview of like, hey, we're going to take this gas oil separation plant, and then as part of regimental combat team 5, we're pushing in, like, this is our corridor, like this is the RCT 5 corridor towards Baghdad, and this is what it looks like. And they laid out cities as like objectives, like, hey, we're going to go from here, and we're supposed to go to Nasiriyah, and uh, there were a few cities we were supposed to go to, and then Baghdad. We didn't go to Nasiriyah. Um, we bypassed, and but it's like we never really knew what was going on. Um, Now I'll say that somewhat lightly, because I'm sure that there are other guys, squad leaders and guys who were like platoon sergeants, platoon commanders. I'm sure they could recall how the flow was, and like, hey, this was the mission this day, and this was the mission this day. And I know there were guys who were taking journals. But I mean, 20 years later, like, I do not remember everything. And there was a hell of a lot of, I have no idea what we're doing. Like, I know for certain there were a lot of days it was like, we're pushing north, and there'd be a vague notion of like, we might have an objective, we might be going into an attack, or we might just be traveling until, uh, an hour before an evening nautical twilight, and we're going to dig in for the night. We did a lot of that, like drive, stop about an hour before sunset, dig in, establish a hasty defensive perimeter, and the next morning it was, fill in your skirmisher trench, your little belly scratch fighting hole, and get back in the track and drive again. And there'd be like pot shots here and there, and there'd be quick skirmishes. But again, the whole tactic was kind of like blitzkrieg. It was like, ignore all the small things and just go for the big objectives. And units are like constant leapfrogging. So like, you might be towards the front of the column because your job is going to be like to peel off to handle a contact, because there's a mechanized company trying to attack the column. So you're going to go peel off and take care of it, and the main body is going to keep pushing to the objective. Um, Kind of stuff like that. And just like, I saw the map once. The whole time, once we crossed line of departure, I saw the map. It was a 1 to 250,000 map. For everybody who doesn't know maps, your grid squares, which is a square kilometer, is about a half inch by half inch. And my platoon sergeant, who had big old bratwurst sized fingers, uses his whole finger to point at something on the map. Meanwhile, his finger covers a little over a full square kilometer, and then he makes a circle with his finger and says, "Oh, we're right about here." I'm like, cool. So like, we're somewhere inside like 9 square kilometers.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a map, so I have no basis where, like, if I had been constantly looking at a map
Right.
and tracking progress, and he looked over and he did that, but oh, okay, like, yeah, I actually know where we're at. No clue where we are. I mean, we could be 10 miles from the line of departure or 10 miles from Baghdad. I have no idea. And no one was really keeping us informed. And part of that was because of the adjustment to the chain of command with the lieutenant gone. And again, some of it is me just, not remembering every detail. But just like, yeah, really never knowing where we were, what we were doing, what was the goal for the day. Was there a goal for the day? Like, how close were we to Baghdad? What's going on? Like, nothing. And a lot of times it would be, hey, we're action right, contact, contact right, contact left, and you feel the Amtrak make a hard turn and start driving off the road, and the ramp would drop, and we would disembark and get on line. And it's like, what are we doing? And it's like, oh, it's respond to contact. We're rushing through. It's like, but what are we doing? Uh,
So just like an inability to communicate effectively from the top down, and you guys are just like you guys are buttoned up, or you may one dude maybe popped up other than the vehicle commander of the track that you're in. So you guys don't have a clear understanding, even if it is a react to contact. There's no address or like I don't want to say address, but like description of what you guys are getting out to address. There's like, all right, sweet.
Yeah, there wouldn't be address, and if there was, like something would be called out, and then whatever that was almost never there. Um, there was a lot of, I would say about 90% of the contact that we made was just snatching dudes up as prisoners because they were surrendering. Either they were intentionally surrendering, or like we just would happen to roll on them and they would try to take off. So, like a platoon would break off and like go chase these guys down. Um, they had us memorize, Iraqi rank structure. So I remember we wrapped up like it was like three colonels, a bunch of lieutenant colonels, and like a handful of majors. And I was like, hell yeah, like we just wrapped up a bunch of officers. Like this has to be a pretty big score. I never heard anything about that. So I have no idea who those guys were, but whatever. Um, we did one attack and I got yelled at. It was like they gave us so much ammo. They gave us so much ammo.
So when
And
you
I
when you
had so
say I was gonna say when you say so
no,
much ammo, is it like you're carrying like a bunch of stripper clips in your pack, or you have like fully loaded? Obviously, you've got your fighting load, but how are you carrying all this ammo?
well beyond fighting loads. So like me, I was overzealous. I had 15 rifle mags on me, bunch of frags, bunch of 40 mic, and then we had to carry two bandoliers in our assault packs, and then we had crates of ammo in the track. You had crates of 5.56, crates of frags, crates of 40 mic. We had Bangalores. We had like 10 AT4s, and it just kept piling. Like they just kept bringing us more ammo, like faster than we were using it. So like I at the point like I disembarked and I just started shooting. I was only shooting 40 mic. I would just boop, just lob one out of my 203, load it back up, rush forward, drop in position, and then I would just start firing. I get like 1 to 3 40 mic rounds out before it's my turn to rush again. And I got like 3 or 4 rushes in and over like the squad radio. So we called it like, who keeps shooting 40 mic? And my call sign was Foxtrot. We just did choose from the alphabet. And I was like, it's Foxtrot. And they were like, stop wasting it. And I'm like, it's not a waste. We have a ton of it. And in my mind, I was lobbing it into this little compound. Like I'm suppressing the enemy, supposed enemy. Like I'm suppressing. And they were like, fucking stop. So
So what is everybody else just like shooting 5.56 at this time? Like maybe the 50s will open up on the track or a Mark 19 or something.
I guess we're just use their 5.56, or in that specific case, no one was shooting, but like, hey, we're gonna, move in that compound. Like there's supposed to be bad guys in that little compound. I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna suppress.
Some
Like
chicken, some nuggets for the Iraqi army. Here you go.
I'm gonna suppress. Like that's the job.
So,
Uh
and Leah, I have to ask, did you have the heat shield, like the Predator style, that's iron sights in the 203, like that old school one? Hell yeah, that's badass.
yeah, something definitely like going back. Uh I didn't have a credit card back then because I was convinced, and it's not completely false, that credit cards were evil. And that I shouldn't have one. So all I had was an ATM card. So I did everything in cash. But going back, I would have had my own credit card, and I would have bought like one of those early Trijicon red dot sights that mounted to the carry handle.
The ones that like it was like a rectangle with like the enclosed, not an enclosed emitter, but like it was like the reflex sight basically, right? Like the old Trijicon reflex sights.
I would have bought one of those, made sure it was well zeroed, because that definitely would have made. I mean, going back now with the skills and knowledge I have now, irons would not be a problem. Um, but I know now going back, like having that red dot, I would have gotten a red dot. I would have figured out a way to put a white light somehow on the rifle. Because there were definitely times, especially that white light, that would have been really nice. And then having that red dot for just faster sight acquisition than irons, would have been really nice, in a lot of, because we did end up doing like a fair amount of close quarters. Like it wasn't always clearing rooms, sometimes it's dropping into little trenches or canals, but finding yourselves in, more confined space. So definitely having that would have been nice. But yeah, we did the thing, man. Just kept pushing forward, not really knowing. We stopped at one point. So we stopped, and then we turn around and we start going the other direction. And it's like, why are we going to, did we make a wrong turn somewhere? Like, why are we going the wrong direction? Like, Baghdad was the way we were going, I thought. Why are we going this way? And we set up in a position there, like, we were apparently moving too fast for the log train. Like, logistics could not keep up with how fast the combat units are pushing forward. And, for all of us at our tiny little tactical level at the squadron platoon are like, what the fuck? Like, these dudes can't keep up. Like, all they have to do is drive their 7 tons in fuel trucks and just keep up with us. Like,
Right.
how hard is that? Not having a full for everything that goes into logistics. So we sat at that position for like 5 days. Like, are we ever going to leave
Oh
here?
my God, 5 days.
Short on water, short on chow, tons of ammo, but can't eat that, can't drink that. And then finally we pick up, we move again to another position, still not getting resupplied with food or water. And they're like, hey, we've got enough water. I think it was like enough water for like a quart a day per guy in the platoon for like the next few days. And it was unknown when we would get resupplied,
Wow.
uh, with chow. And a lot of guys, again, because our experience was just going to the field, and you've got more than you need in the field, and guys just kind of eat, and now guys were just eating. And I told you, I'm like, look, man, like, you know, one MRE equals one meal, 3 meals a day. I'm like, if you eat more than that, you're gonna run out of food.
Right.
And I look at my guys, like, what do you guys got left? And I reported up to my old squad leader, now platoon sergeant, and he starts yelling at me. He's like, I told you. I'm like, I told my guys, like, I can't be over them every second of the day. If they choose to get up and get another MRE out of their pack because they're bored on watch in the middle of the night, like, I can't stop that.
Right.
Uh,
Well, and too, it's
so,
like you guys are at this weird, like, unless you'd, were you guys issued camelbacks at this point in time, or do you just have canteens?
so we did have camelbacks. We had like the very early, probably the original military issue, like the first time ever military issue camelbacks that came with the Molly 2 gear system from back then.
Okay.
So everybody had a camelback, um, two 1 quart canteens, and a 2 quart canteen. So we were all capable of carrying, what would that be? 3, 5, 7 quarts of water.
Okay.
Uh, you had to have 2 quarts of water on your fighting load, and the rest could be in your pack. Um, and then at that position, I don't remember. I don't remember if we got resupplied or not there. But what I do remember, because this was like Christmas, is they're like, "Hey, it really doesn't look like we're going to get hit with any kind of, chemical, biological threat. So we're going to switch to camis. We're going to take off because we've been wearing chemical protective overgarments still, the mop suits, just over, PT gear. Like we're going to go to camis. So like taking off those mop suits
Oh,
and putting on the camis, it was like putting on pajamas. It was like, yes. And, now we're in desert camis in a desert environment. Like now we actually feel like we can blend in better. So that was really nice. That was a good bit of motivation, and that was ultimately, I think, like 2 days before, 2 3 days before we
get to
actually made
Baghdad.
it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's at this point, had you guys really if I were to ask you if to this point where you guys now are waiting to about to head into Baghdad, do you think that you've sharpened your teeth or like got like are you satisfied with the experience that it is so far? Like, is it living up to the expectations, or are you kind of disappointed with the, current invasion of the country you're in?
Yeah, it was we kept waiting for the fight to happen, right? Because everything had been like real quick skirmishes, quick exchanges of like, somebody take a pot shot at the convoy, and some guys would shoot back that were like up on air watch out of the top of the tracks. Occasionally they would send out the tracks to go do stuff, and you'd hear tanks doing things, and it was like we had not yet been embroiled in a fight, and we were kind of like, is there going to be a fight to this thing? Because right now it's kind of like a really shitty field op with, you're actually concerned that you might die because you realize you're in war, like you could die, but like nothing's happening. It was always like these, oh, there's a T-72 to our front, and everyone's going to stand too because there's a tank somewhere to our front, and guys are turning their lasers on and scanning with their illuminators, and I'm like, hey guys, remember like the T-72s have night vision, like we should probably turn those off. uh, you know, or like there's Republican Guard is trying to infiltrate our lines. Like go to stand two, and you're like watching for like some little dude in a black beret to like be creeping through the desert at you or something. So it was like constant like being put on alert, being put on alert, being put on alert. Hey, we're doing an action right, we're doing an action left, contact right, contact left. But like it never really panned out to be anything
That it
at
was hyped
all.
up to be. Yeah, like you guys were getting hyped up and like that I always say like the cattle prod, like the they're trying to get you in the zone like that stand two of like, oh, be prepared for the enemy. And it's like bzz, 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 giving you that zap and you guys are all ready to get down and then nothing happens.
And then occasionally, and guys would engage, when they did, it always engage from like max weapons range. Like that first, anti-air gun firing at us. It was like fire at us with something from a super long ways away, and then they'd bail. So by the time like we're within weapons range, like they're gone, or they're just surrendering. And we started hearing instances of guys surrendering, but then they would, drop a frag on the Marines that would come to capture them. So it was like, all right, well, now I've been told I can't issue no quarters because that's against the Geneva Convention. But I kind of like I looked at my guys. I'm like, I can't tell you no quarters, but I am telling you that I value my life and your life way more than any Iraqis. So we're gonna do what we have to do to go home. Like
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave it at that. Like you guys can interpret that any way you choose. Again, I'm not saying we commit war crimes, but I'm kind of saying that we go home.
Yeah.
Like that's my vote. And
I
it
mean,
was just
to
Or
instill
weird.
that mindset, like that thought process of being put in a situation where that could be a decision that you have to make, as a young man, as a young leader, and having to utter those words. And I don't think a lot of people understand the severity behind statements like that, or relaying a message to your fire team or your squad or that battalion commander that's standing out there before you go into a hot, area of operations, and it's basically anybody that you deem a threat, like you are cleared to engage. And it's like that's some heavy shit to tell a group of young men that are being sent into combat, and for the first time in a long time as well.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's actually at that position where we got to change over in the camis out of the mop suits. We got the combat replacement for Lieutenant Childers. Uh, then Lieutenant Terrell, who I don't think he's still there. I think he may have finished his tour, but actually went back. He stayed in the Marine Corps, kind of like skipping ahead real quick. He stayed in the Marine Corps, made it to Lieutenant Colonel, and he was the battalion commander for 1st Battalion, 5th Marines um, just a few years ago. So I think his time there is probably done by now. Uh, but it's kind of a cool thing. Like the
Yeah,
dude showed up as a combat replacement, and then eventually went back to be the battalion commander for like his first unit in the fleet. But it was funny because at that point too, uh, they had let the PFC, private first class Amtracker drive. Um, we had a corporal driver, we had a staff sergeant as the vehicle commander, and then they had this PFC, and they would occasionally let him drive. He was not a good driver. Like he didn't know how to shift. Always you always knew when he was driving because like you'd hear the engine like revving up super high and then he would shift really hard and you're getting jostled around. And we're like, do not let that dude drive. But they kept doing it. And I mean, they had to, right? Because that corporal can only drive for so long. There were a lot of cases of like dudes falling asleep at the wheel and vehicles colliding because guys are being having to drive for 18, 24 hours straight.
brutal.
So like, they have this young dude drive and he destroys, he blows out the transmission, kills our track. So now we have to split our squad in half and pile into the other two squads because there's 3 squads to platoon. So now I'm piled into first squad's track with my fire team, a couple of the guys from the squad, um, and I'm used to that squad leader being in the TC hatch, because you've got vehicle commander and then there's the tactical commander or the troop commander has like their own little seat. And I'm used to him sitting there. So I look over expecting to see him, and this little head pokes up out with his glasses and his nerdy face, and he's all clean. And I'm like, who the hell are you? He's like, I'm your new lieutenant. And I'm like, no. And I look down in the track and I'm trying to find the squad leader. I'm like, who the hell is this guy? And he was like, that's the new lieutenant. And I look over, I was like, so you really are the new lieutenant? He's like, yeah. I was like, well, I'm Corporal Flannery. Nice to meet you.
Holy shit,
And
that's
I'm like, and I was like, wow, that actually happens. And yeah, we had another moment. Somebody in their infinite wisdom uh was like, well, here's a city. So we're gonna take this city, but after we take the city, we need to set up a defensive position. So we're gonna go set up in this big open area, right next to the city. And no one ever thought why there might be specifically this flat open area, like kind of next to the city, because it was a literal dump. It's where all the trash went for the city. They're like, well, we've already planned to set up our defense here and we're not going to change it. So we had to sleep overnight in the dump, like in the garbage. Because you can't stay in the track because then you don't have dispersion in case they decide to attack us with like artillery or anything like that. So we have to spread out and like dig into the trash. And there's so many flies. The only way to keep the flies away was smoke. So we all started making little burning piles of trash.
Jeez.
Away the flies.
That's something I've never heard before, dude. That's wild. I mean, you talk about burn pits, but you're like, I mean, we were living, burn pits are like outside the patrol base, but you guys are living in the fucking burn pit, dude. That's insane.
Trying to find and like me and you like in like little buddy pairs, and it was like I was like try not to burn. Let's try not to burn plastic. Like let's try to find like paper and like if there's anything made of wood. Like let's just burn that. But eventually you had to start burning pieces of plastic because there's only so much you can. That was just completely awful. And finally it's like hey like no like we're making entry into Baghdad tonight. Like we're rolling into Baghdad finally. It's like awesome. Here it comes, getting into Baghdad, and it's like you get to Baghdad, and it's Mario climbs the flagpole, slides down 5,000 points, go to the castle, go home, right? Like that that'll be victory. And we get in, and we're driving, and at this point, because there's so many dudes in the track, that I'm not inside the track for like the past few days since like I saw the new lieutenant. I've actually just been laying in the prone at the very top. So I'm not inside the track. I have no benefits that the vehicle confers other than the fact that I'm not using my feet to get around. And an RPG goes off. And it's I don't know, 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning, something like that. RPG goes off, and I just remember like looking up at it because through my night vision, it looked like a pop up flare because you just like see the
Yeah, so the
rocket going around.
trail, like the yeah, right behind it, yeah.
It's kind of like look at it. I was like, whoa, and it didn't even register to me like immediately what was happening because it was so high off. Like I have no idea where that guy thought he was shooting that thing, but it was way over our heads. And then other people start shooting. I was like, oh shit, that was an RPG. So I started shooting it where I had seen it go off, and the whole city just opened up on us.
Hmm.
Like there was gunfire and RPGs, zero hearing protection. It's like can't put hearing protection in because then you won't hear the bad guys coming. And no one has muffs. We didn't have, helmet rails where you could rotate it down really quick.
Right?
Like I had a set of earplugs probably somewhere in my pack at that point. So no hearing protection. And it's like you see flashes or you see like an RPG go off and you shoot at that spot, or like you see a silhouette and you're like shoot at that. And then all of a sudden we made a wrong turn. So now we're like making 3-point turns in the middle of this, it just seems like everywhere you went, like the whole city been turned into a kill zone. And like making a 3-point turn when we're getting shot at, like what the crap is this? And there was like finally just after daybreak, there was like a slight pause, and that Lieutenant Terrell pokes his head up and he looks at me and I look at him and we just like laughed. Just like a good like what the hell is going on? We just laughed and then like the shooting started again. And it was just continuous all the way through the morning. We got to the palace, pulled into the palace, and I was like, okay, like cool, we're behind the palace walls. I felt really exposed, but there was no way for me to get down into the track.
Right.
And
Well,
they're like, hey,
all while this is happening too, like you're laying essentially in the prone on like when the track opens up, like you're just laying on the hatch, right? Like you're in the prone on the top of the vehicle. Are there also other Marines just like standing up and engaging?
Yeah, so where the hatches open, and there's like 4 or 5 guys on each side, like standing up, their guns out, and they're participating in the fight too. And there's a short section between like where the opening is for the hatches and where like the exhaust is. It was like just wide enough for me to lay in the prone. That's where I was. That was my spot for like 3 days. I mean, I would sleep up there like all night, be like, all right, well, I've been awake for 14 hours. Like I know all the guys down inside the Amtrak are sleeping. I was like, I'm just gonna kind of roll over, and they're rotating, out of security. I'm just stuck up here. Like I've been on watch since for 14 hours. Like I'm gonna rack out for 2 hours, and I'd rack out for 2 hours. I'd wake back up and back at it again, laying there in the prone, looking out. Uh,
So
but now
up to this point, how far in are we? Like you've already got like has the statue been taken down? Like you guys are probably what like a week, maybe 2 weeks into it at this point?
we, as far as I remember it, we made entry into Baghdad. Uh, I guess that night of when it went down. Like initially, they had told us like we were the first ones in, but I don't think that's actually true. I believe it was the night of the statue coming down, or maybe it was the night before. But it was right around then, and we get to the palace. And it's like, okay, so like, what's next? The palace had been hit with a J dam, and like it's wrecked. So like, I don't think we're gonna go clear that, but like, I don't know how big this compound is. So I guess we're about to start clearing like palace compound. They're like, hey, new mission, and so they sent. I was Alpha Company, first time Fifth Marines, and I know they sent us and Charlie Company out. I don't remember what Bravo did. Bravo may have stayed behind to um, secure the palace, but I think they got the same mission. There were 3 sightings for Saddam in the area, so they sent each of the companies out there to essentially do a high value capture mission. And so we go out, and as soon as we leave the palace walls, again, we're getting lit up. And it just seemed that like all the contact was coming from the opposite side of the Amtrak from where I was laying. And so part of me always wanted to like turn around, but to turn around, I would have to get up on my hands and knees
And expose
and,
yourself as more of a target, you know? Yeah.
and turn around. And I'm like, and the second I do that, like the contact's just going to come from the other side. So I might as well just like hang here and make the best of it. But it's like the whole time. And I remember yelling. There was a guy with a 249 behind me on the other side, and I kept yelling at him. I was like, dude, light those people, because there's like constant RPGs flying overhead from behind me, and like I can hear gunfire coming at us from behind me. And I'm like, dude, light them up. Like I do not want to get shot in the ass because you're afraid to use your friggin' machine gun. Uh, and same thing. Like you see muzzle flashes coming out of doors, and you're shooting at it, and then it got to a point like you're just firing to like where you think the bad guys might be at, and like
Okay, so
RP.
on that note, real quick, like with this saw gunner, like you got this guy with a belt-fed machine gun behind you, and like, do you think like and it makes me think of this with a situation like that, where this guy's not like, just dumping rounds, right? You have all this ammo, you have all these frags and rockets, so it seems like you have a surplus of ammunition to be able to like, effectively engage targets. Were there initially some guys that you saw that were hesitant to start engaging some of these targets, whether they were unsure of, like wanting to shoot somebody or unsure of like, are you, am I able to do this right now? Or is this like, am I getting, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there was any confusion or uncertainty about whether or not they were allowed to fire, because I definitely saw that later on in other deployments. There may have been some hesitancy on some guys to pull the trigger, to put another human being in their sights and pull the trigger. But I think a bigger part of it in that instance was same guy was like, I I was not always seeing what everybody else was shooting at, and I'm
Right.
like, am I experiencing some kind of like visual occlusion where like I just don't see the bad guys? Because like the RPGs were just like screaming in from like around corners and off of rooftops, but like I never saw the guys firing them. And I could hear the rounds coming in from over my head, but I didn't see anybody. You saw like muzzle flashes from like deep in rooms and things like that. So it's like, am I just not seeing this? Like, am I just not somehow not seeing the bad guys? But I think it's mostly just because they were trying to shoot from concealed positions. And, by the time you realize somebody is there, they've fired
They're
off an
gone.
RPG or gunfire and they've moved again. They're
Right.
gone. Um, so I think that was part of it too, because like not everybody was just constantly shooting, but there were guys who were shooting, and it was like I finally looked at the guy next to me like, "What are you shooting at? Like, what do you see? Like, call it out." And he's like, "Dude, I'm just putting rounds in the doors to keep them back." And I'm like, "Okay." Like, I guess because right now it's like it seems like everyone's shooting at us. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It was wild, but shooting back and just so many RPGs, man. There's like friggin' bees in the air. There's so many.
So how long does this then, like after you guys have hit Baghdad, right? The night you get there, and then you guys start, like, feels like the city's opening up on you. How long does that, I guess, sustainment of the enemy's op tempo continue for?
So it was like an 8-hour gunfight. And I remember everybody made a big deal about it because it was like the longest sustained gunfight since Vietnam. Because it went on for like about 8 hours. Our mission when we left the palace to go to this Saddam sighting to go capture Saddam was a mosque, and we got to the mosque, and I'd been on top of this Amtrak now for like 36 hours or longer.
Atrophy has set in.
I had I had to piss. I had to piss so bad. And we get to the mosque, we drop the ramp, and as like I'm getting out trying to find a spot to like get dispersion, there's like nowhere to take cover, and there's a burning APC, and it's like popping, and there's like secondaries going off. I'm like, oh, that's ammo burning off inside that APC. And I'm like laying in the prone behind this curb. And I'm like, dude, that thing's gonna blow up because like the pops are getting like more frequent. And I'm like, that thing's gonna blow up, dude. And I'm like, just like there's the curb and there's the top of my helmet, and I'm like just barely looking at this thing. And then it blows up, and I tilt my head down. I feel the heat on my back. A bunch of dudes on the other side of the street like caught little bits of shrapnel from it. And I'm like, man, I still really need to pee. Like, I really need to pee. And so, that thing blew up, and I'm like, I'm in a crappy position here. So, like, I get up, I run over across the street, and like everyone's up against this wall. And I'm like, screwed. I like face the wall, I take a knee, I open up my fly, and, pull up my wiener, and I just start peeing on the wall. But I get my gun back in my hands, and like I'm looking around, and like I'm peeing and I'm peeing and I'm peeing. Everybody gets up and starts like running towards the breach. I'm like, shit, I'm peeing. So like I like stand up, and I'm like side shuffling, trying to face the wall because we're in the middle of a gunfight, but God forbid I show anybody my.
Yeah,
I'm like side shuffling, like still trying to look around me with both hands on my gun, still peeing on the wall. And then I was like, I think I said like I've got rear security or something like that. So I like let everybody pass me, and then I finish, you know, put my dick away, and then I like try to sprint back to the front to like be part of the entry. Uh,
yeah, that is great, dude. That's one for the books right there. I tell you what, like, God forbid somebody sees my dick. We're in the middle of a firefight, and it's not like, yeah, is that
we uh we get in the mosque, and where we breached, I went to the right, and which is ultimately like the bad decision on my part. I should have gone straight, but it just seemed like the right was calling me, and there were already a couple of guys going right. So like I ran that way, uh, but the mosque like ended kind of the way the structure was set up. It kind of ended there, and it went more straight. But I was like, the more guys already went that way, so like they're already gonna get the action. There's fewer guys to the right. It's like going to the right, but it kind of ended right there. But it went down into a basement, pitch black, completely black. And things that we did not train on back then is we did not train to clear on night vision because we identified in our training that your nods don't work very well inside because they need ambient illumination. Even if it's starlight, they need ambient illumination. So going into a completely enclosed.
Well, and at this time, are you running like PVS sevens? Are you running mono like dual oculars and then
Some guys still had 7 Bravos because I made corporal. I rated PVS 14s.
okay,
So
okay.
I went speed and had PVS 14s. Um, yeah, like no one trained. Like we really didn't train. Like we tried it and we're like, oh, this doesn't work. Like we need white light. But the white lights we had at the time was called the VLI, and it took like
Six
eight or
batteries, yeah.
12 or something like that. Like it's a stupid amount of double A's. It probably only produced like 120 lumens too, which is silly. But the adapters only connected to the M16 A2 handguard, that plastic A2 handguard.
Right.
So me with a 3, right, I didn't have a white light. So I was like, I can't see if I go down there. And I like started going down the steps. And once again, I got that same feeling like I'm walking into the unknown. And if there's anybody in that basement, their eyes are adjusted and I stick out like a sore thumb and I'm going to get shot. I was like, who's got lights? I'm like, we need guys with lights to go down there. Uh, so we held security, got a handful of guys with lights and, pushed them down into that basement. And then like I pushed behind them and it was, totally empty. Uh, there were stairs going up to another point. So like I walked over and I dropped a red chem light. It's like, oh, this will signal that there's potential danger down here at the bottom of these stairs, which is like an actual thing. Um, but I was like, and I'm gonna stand there and watch that red chem light. And, maybe I'll catch some Iraqis trying to run away from some other Marines. So they try to come down these stairs, and like left a connecting file, and nothing came of that, which is kind of disappointing.
Yeah, but it's
And
it's
then
all those instances though where you're putting yourself in these positions. I mean, it's like the fear of the unknown, like in a territory that you haven't explored. I mean, yeah, you've gotten a little, like engagements and yeah, you booted some doors in, but now you guys are like after you've been taking legitimate contact, like you guys are in firefights, there's, getting shot at from all over. Now that like that this is a different level of moving on to I mean, I don't know if you want to call it the tiers of progression in the way that you guys are, attacking these objectives and shit. Now you're like, well, what's to say that there's nobody lurking in these dark rooms, like or these corridors, and we don't have lights to be effective. Now you've gotten a taste of it, so you would be expecting that to, come from going in situations like that, and you're completely unprepared in terms of gear and equipment that you would need to be able to effectively, operate in situations like that.
yeah, yeah. So it was I mean, it was interesting. It was definitely a learning experience overall, but surprise, surprise, didn't find Saddam. And then we took a few other prisoners. On the way out of the mosque, we were getting rocked still by RPGs and some other explosions, and a chandelier fell from the ceiling, and like it landed right in the middle of a group of us that were kind of standing there, like waiting, like what's the word? What are we doing? Where are we going? Uh, Building shakes, and this friggin' chandelier drops, almost crushes us. So I actually snagged a piece of it. I think my mom has it right now. So it was like a souvenir that I ended
Yeah,
up
yeah.
taking back.
Oh, and also this is another thing I was wondering too. Like, what's your comm situation like? Like inner squad. Like, yeah, and obviously, I'm sure that a platoon commander, like the vehicles, have a way. Like we've already established that with the squawk box, you hear all the comms. But how are you guys able to communicate from squad to squad as you're making entry and hitting these objectives?
Yeah, they designated a radio operator for each platoon. So once we were in Kuwait, a handful of guys got some additional training on the Prick 119, and then some guys got to learn the Prick 148. But there's still a lot of issues of like guys not really understanding because it was really quick. But they also handed out I forget what some they were called the PRR, and it was handful. I think it was like maybe 6 channels or something like that. You couldn't program it. Like it was already set. All you could do was like change the channels on it. It was already set to certain frequencies. It was not encrypted. Um, and every fire team leader and squad leader had one of those.
Gotcha.
So every platoon had their own net. So you could use that to talk to anybody in the platoon. So we would use that, but uh, yeah, we didn't. I don't think we made much use out of it because we did the whole workup without that. Um, like when we go to the field, the squad leaders would be issued ICOM radios, but those were used really like for administration. You'd be out with your squad, and the lieutenant or the staff sergeant would call your squad leader like, "Hey, it's chow time. Come back to the bivouac site."
Gotcha.
You'd move site. Like it was rarely used for like coordinating in the attack. Um,
So everything up to this point that you guys had been training for had either been like coming from your platoon commander, obviously he's probably got the radio operator attached to him. He's giving an order and your squad leader's either yelling something out or you guys are just passing everything with hand and arm signals.
yeah, it's all verbal or hand and arm signal. Um, we definitely made some use of like when I was told to stop shooting 40 Mike that came over, those little inter squad radios. That were used here and there. Uh, but it was one of those things like there were so many of us on the net because it was every fire team leader and every squad leader, uh, plus the platoon sergeant had one. So there's like 18 guys that have this little radio. And initially it starts off everybody wants to talk on the radio, and we're all chatting. And then pretty quickly it's like, hey, stop being dicks on the radio, like keep it professional. And while we're still in Kuwait, and then it turns into like, all right, so kind of like no one talks on the radio now because no one wants to be the guy that says the wrong thing and gets yelled at. So we didn't make, at least from what I recall, like any significant use of the radio. I mean, I tried using it that instance, like say, hey, I'm at this position in the mosque and I need guys with weapon lights because the basement's dark and once again, people are like, just go clear it. I'm like, I can't see. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And that did bother me for a while because like I gathered up other guys that had lights and I sent them down. And I'm like, it doesn't feel right to send other guys. But again, if I go down there and I did follow them, like once they made entry through the threshold, I followed. But I'm like, what? What am I going to do? And even when I got down there, I'm like,
You're a
I don't have a
liability. You're a liability at that point.
gate right by the door. I just stepped out of the door, the threshold, and like stayed by the door. Like I can't even sight in right now. Like I can see where their lights are, and they illuminate a little bit around them, but they're not lighting up this whole dark basement.
Right.
So I'm like, I can't see anything. I'm like, the best that I can do is if they put their light on someone who's a bad guy, maybe I can bring up my rifle and see enough of my sights to also engage. But like, what am I doing? But I still always felt for a long time, it felt really wrong that I like gathered other dudes and sent them down, go do it. But it's like they had the equipment.
Right.
I didn't have the proper equipment like they did. Uh,
Well, good thing that obviously nothing came from that because I know that there's been situations that guys have been put in where obviously they need to, not just because you're in a leadership position, but obviously, equipment wise, and you send somebody to do something and that results in, loss of life or limb. And that's something that guys have got and gals, have hard time, living with and wrestling with, it's difficult, but unfortunately you didn't at that point in time have to do that. So you guys get out of the mosque, still, heavy RPG action, almost get crushed by a chandelier and get a little souvenir from mom. What's next?
Back to the palace. Same thing, still getting lit up, RPG, small arms fire, all the way back to the palace. And unfortunately, earlier in the day is where we had taken our second KIA for the company, our company gunny, Jeffrey Bohr. He was shot because he and headquarters were or his headquarters detachment were riding around in just a regular unarmored high back Humvee. Like everyone who was in a Humvee was in an unarmored Humvee. Um, they had thrown like some spare flak jackets over the over the doors to try and give like a little extra armor. Uh, but he had taken around, so he had been killed earlier on in the day, and so when we got back, it was kind of like figuring that out now. Like now, somebody else, has been killed. The other guy I had mentioned earlier had taken a round to the forearm that happened in that fight in Baghdad. Uh,
How'd you guys ultimately stop the bleeding for that? Was it just like packing, 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 and wrapping? Did you ultimately end up tourniqueting that arm?
no, I don't believe they ever tourniqueted the arm. I think they eventually managed to apply some kind of a dressing tight enough to stop the bleeding. But one of the issues is I think they were using a shirt or something at some point, and they were applying pressure and then pulling it off to see if it had worked. And then they would apply pressure again and then pull it off to see if it had worked. Because none of us understood the whole clotting process. And like, it's not like, when you prick your finger or cut your face shaving, you apply pressure, for like 30 seconds and then you take it off to see if it stopped the bleeding.
Right.
It's like,
That's a yeah.
when there's venous and I don't think it was actually the artery, and that's why he didn't bleed out. It was just venous ooze. Um, but yeah, eventually somehow they got it stopped, or we got him to a corpsman who figured it out. I really don't remember. I just remember that he was in. So he was in he was one of the headquarters guys. So he was in the soft unarmored Humvee with Gunny, and he got transferred to our track to get him in an armored vehicle. And it was like, and I was freaking out trying to, stop the bleeding, but I was up on top. And so it was like kind of hearing what was going on down below, but I was very much busy up top with everything that was going on up there. Um,
So up to this point, I mean, you've got initially your platoon commander is the first KIA, then you've got the company gunny, and then now one of the Marines has a gunshot wound. What I don't want to. I mean, this is still early on too, but what's the mindset that you're thinking about this? Like, obviously, you know that this is real, and once you start taking those casualties, how does that affect the like, morale, the motivation, and the mindset of you and the guys that are in your platoon, squad, fire team?
uh, I, to lose Gunny, that was another big blow. Um, and not to diminish anyone else, but if it had been, one of the fire team leaders or a saw gunner or an A gunner in one of the fire teams, like that would have sucked. Uh, But when it's someone who's not as large of a personality as like the company gunny, like if you've been in the Marine Corps, like the company gunny is like a personality, and Jeffrey Bohr himself was a big time personality. So to lose him um was definitely a blow to morale, but at the same time really just kind of motivated us more to be like, we're just gonna kill all these sons of bitches. Like they took Lieutenant Childers, now they took Gunny Bohr. Like these people are gonna pay. Um, I can't really speak for anybody. I think at that point too, there was a certain level of just being almost numb to it, and it's not like we had taken a bunch of casualties, but it's kind of like it's awful, but we've been hit with it so fast, so early on. And it's like it's awful,
Not registering yet.
kind of like, you know, you almost accept it in a way.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, we had a um, handful of other casualties. One guy had a concussion. He was medevac for concussion because the RPG hit a telephone pole and exploded. And I no idea why. I was prompted to look up, but I saw the thing launch. And I looked up. It hit the telephone pole, and the motor came off, and the motor was just spinning. And I thought it was coming right for me, so I rolled, tucked my chin, and tried to put my back to it to hope it would like hit me in the back of the plate. And I thought it hit me in my rear plate. What it actually hit was the guy that was standing up in the track. It cracked him in the head, but it hit him so hard that he impacted into me hard enough that I thought I had been like punched with something hard. Cracked his helmet open, knocked him unconscious. As we're like feeling that, waiting there for a second, be like, okay, I don't feel any pain. Like I think I'm all right. And I rolled back onto my belly and I looked over, and he wasn't still standing there. So I looked down and he's like on his back down below, and guys are like shaking him awake. And I'm like, oh shit. I go back shooting, look back down again, and now he's awake. And I tried yelling down to him, uh, and he kind of smiled. I doubt he could hear me, but he probably just registered that I was trying to talk to him. And I'm like, well, if he's smiling, I guess he's okay. And I just went back to fighting. Uh, Eventually, he popped back up with his broken ass helmet and went back to shooting a lot because now he's pissed off.
Hell yeah.
Uh, but he ended up getting medevac for concussion. Um, I think we medevac one other person that caught some shrapnel from that APC that blew up. I know a couple of guys had like some little bits that had to get dug out of them, but I don't remember if we had to evac any of them.
So
Yeah, it was just
you guys have been through a little bit of the ringer, a little couple punches to the jaw, obviously in the form of losses, both killed in action and wounded in action, and guys taken off the battlefield. This obviously is a drives um, that will to fight and keep moving forward and taking the fight to the enemy. So where does this get to a point? Like, what's your objective now? You guys are just clearing village or like city to city to city, building to building to building. Are you doing a lot of continual dismounting and clearing door to door, building the building, house to house, or are you in the tracks and just you're pushing through to an objective?
so we pushed back to uh we just pushed back to the house. We'd expected to have to do like what we ended up doing, the next deployment for Fallujah, we'd expected to have to do that room to room, house to house, block by block fighting, but we just got back in the tracks and just like rolling gun battled our way back to the palace. And Once the battalion was back at the palace, it was kind of like everything kind of calmed down. Um, and I mean, the palace walls were pretty stout, and we had plenty of security, so like we were able to kind of disembark and slightly decompress from all that, and then it turned into establishing hardened defensive perimeter at the palace and kind of establishing a pattern of life. I think we were there for about a week, maybe less. We would do patrols into the city, and like the first time we go out patrolling, it's like, yeah, like we're gonna get into a fight. Like we got into a fight before, like we're gonna get into a fight now, and everybody was going out loaded, like heavily loaded. Like everyone was like, dude, you're insane. You're carrying way too much ammo. But after that one, like everybody went out with a ton of mags. We were shooting so much, like guys were ejecting mags out of their guns down to the guys below who would be catching it with one hand and handing up the next mag with the other. And like that was their reloading rotation. And
Wow.
you'd be guys were jamming magazines or fresh rounds and handing it back up to the guys who were up top. Um, so everyone's as loaded as they can, and we were doing our first patrol, platoon size patrol, and we got probably like halfway through it, and nothing had been happening, but all the people have been coming out and waving at us, speaking whatever English that they knew. I remember one kid threw me a basketball, and I dribbled the ball for a little bit, threw it back to him. But we get like halfway through this patrol, and machine gun fire towards the rear. Like, all right, here we go. That's going to kick it off. You know, turn, face the contact, start moving towards a piece of cover, like expecting more gunfire to erupt. Head and eyes everywhere, like, hey, what's going on? And the radios start kind of lighting up, like, what's going on? What's going on? Dude, ND'd with his M249. He had it set to condition one, and he had put it down, and he had an older saw. He put it down really hard. The safety failed, sent the bolt home, and it runaway gun fired like 3 or 4 rounds. Uh, and in the process, those rounds went forward. They ricocheted off the concrete, and the jacket of one of those rounds came off, went through another Marine's boot into his foot. Right, so like we heard machine gun fire, we heard someone's been hit, but what it turned out was dumbass ND'd his machine gun, and another guy took a jacket of one of the rounds through his boot into his foot. I mean, it bled a good little bit, and he kind of limped back, but we changed our route, went right back to the palace, and got him medical attention. And it's like, all right, well, false alarm. That dude's an idiot. Uh, and then we would just go on patrols, and like we really had no problems. At night, we had issues of they tried to like push into our lines, and they got lit up by machine guns, and they tried to mount a counterattack to retake the palace. Something like couple hundred fighters or so. They put a decent amount of people, and their staging area was a stadium right next to the palace. And our counter intel guys found out about it, so they allowed the bad dudes to stage, and then they dropped a bomb on them.
Oh,
So they had,
fuck, really?
yeah, I mean they annihilated like a company-sized enemy element, with a single bomb. Um, so after that, like they're like, yeah, no, no, not the guys on that side of the river. Things kind of calmed down on our side. Across the river where the army was, those guys were always getting into it. They were constantly fighting over there. But on our side of the river, I don't. They just decided that we weren't worth the trouble, I guess.
So once you guys had like your intel had, proved that these guys were staging, you take out like a company size element with assume like one GBU or something, 2,000 pounder just right foreheads on foreheads. Um How long does this deployment? It seems like you guys on your side of the river, like you said, you're engaging some of the local populace and dribbling basketballs and waving to the locals. Um, does that maintain like the pace for the rest of the deployment? You guys like maybe some nighttime stuff and some pot shots and stuff, but is it pretty smooth for the rest of the time that you guys are in Iraq?
Yeah, it was smooth. President Bush delivered his speech of "We won," and we got past that message. They're like, "Hey, we won," and we're all like, "Are we sure we won?" They're like, "You sure?" And they're like, "Yeah, we accomplished what we came here to do." And we're like, "Okay, like we don't have Saddam, but I guess we toppled his regime, and that's what we were here to do." And again, we're in the very bottom of the tactical level, being dudes in the squad. So like the idea of rebuilding the country and reestablishing government, we're like, yeah, whatever. Like they'll figure it out. Germany figured it out again, right, on their own. And at the time, not being like much of a history buff, like I loved history, but didn't know that much as I thought I did. It's like, yeah, sure. Like I guess this will kind of work out. It doesn't feel done, but whatever. Uh, so then we retrograded to Ad Diwania. Uh, we were there for a couple weeks, and things started going like admin again. Basically, that became like, I guess you could call it like one of the first fobs in a sense. It's like, hey, we're inside friendly lines. We did a few patrols out of there, but we got there and they're like, oh yeah, like this section over here, they're playing movies. Like they've got a projector and they're playing
Yeah.
movies on the wall. So like we go walking over and there's like some dude standing by a guard shack, and I figured he was just like hanging out by this guard shack. No, they'd actually turned an old guard shack because we were on some old Iraqi military base. Like he wanted us to show ID to like go in this area. I was like, dude, do you not see we're dressed the same as you? I'm speaking the same language as you. Like we all have EGAs ironed into our boonie covers right now. Like, why do you need to see our ID? Who the hell are you? And he's like, oh, I'm the sergeant of the guard. But
Regards. Regards.
it's like, I don't know, something out of a film. It's like this dude's like really clean. His camis look like just fresh out of the laundry. He's got eye of the gerbil, and we're all just dirty. Uh, you know, just filthy. And that eventually became a problem. He tried to like turn guys away. He's like, no, you guys are too dirty to come through this area.
Oh man. Do I yeah, I know. I fucking know that for sure. I mean,
Like no, you don't get to turn us away. Like we know you guys are playing movies in here. Like we're gonna go down and we're gonna find that and we're gonna go watch a movie. Like you are not stopping us. And I remember I looked at him this one time. I'm like, dude, there's fucking six of us and one of you. We are willing to use our guns against you. He's like, that's fucked up. I'm like, yeah,
what's also
yeah.
fucked up is you like being a douchebag to other Marines. I mean, that's ridiculous too. And so quickly, after you guys had done that, like it establishes that like that admin, that rear echelon lifestyle, and like I can fuck, dude, we came back from Sangin, we had we stopped in Leatherneck and we get out like camis ripped up, like dudes had just gotten blown up. Like we were missing like an entire fire team basically of our platoon. And we are going to walk into the chow hall and this sergeant, in camis and an 8-point cover. And we got like dirty ass frog gear and a boonie cover on. And he's like, what are you Marines doing? We're like, we're going to the chow hall. He's like, not like that, you aren't. And we're like, what? He's like, you guys are, dirty. You need to go. Like, we didn't have extra frog here. It's like, we didn't have the ability to shower at this point in time. We're coming in real quick, getting chow. And finally, one of the, sorry, I'm not trying to make this about, but I can relate, dude. Not in the same, but that rear echelon style of well, what are you guys doing? You guys are dirty. What are you doing here? Just getting chow, dude. Just hungry, getting food,
Yeah.
warm food.
So in tuning, and it creates this divide. It's like confirmation bias. You're a grunt, and there's some like super clean pogue telling you that you can't do things because you're too dirty. It's like, how do you not realize where we are right now? But yeah, so I mean, weird life, and we went on PT runs, we did platoon PT, and no one's concerned about dispersion anymore because we're not concerned about getting hit with artillery or mortar fire. So like we set up our tent cities where you're double arms interval from each other in tents, and it was kind of like did we really deploy? Like, was this really going to war? Like, we didn't feel like we'd done all that much. And then the talk became like how long the we started looking at it, and like it felt like a long time. But then we looked at the time frame, like, man, like we've only been in Iraq for like 2 months.
Yeah,
And we were in Kuwait for like a month and a half before that. Like, we actually haven't been deployed in total all that long, and we've only been in combat for a short period of time. And that hasn't really felt like what we all thought it was going to be and what was kind of built up to be. And it's like talk like we may not even get like a sea service deployment ribbon for this. Like,
yeah,
because
because
they're
it's
like,
the
hey, they're gonna
90 days, right? 90 days for sea service.
and they're like, hey, they want to pull us. They wanted to pull us out because we were supposed to go on the 31st MEU to Okinawa, but instead they geared us up and sent us in the country, and they left 2nd Battalion 4th Marines in Okinawa. So they're like, hey, we're gonna pull 1-5 back. You're gonna do a quick work up again. All the guys that we put on stop loss are going to be allowed to, EAS and move on. We're going to get new people to fill in the ranks, and we're going to deploy to the 31st MEU. Like, we're going to come home and have a quick turnaround and go back out and go on the MEU because now that the war is over, uh, we have to fix the MEU rotation, was how it was phrased. The war is over. We have to fix the MEU rotation.
No way. That's
And,
crazy.
yeah, so we pulled out June of 03, like late June of 03. Well, we got we got back to California late June of 03. I don't remember exactly what day we left Iraq, but we flew out of Ad Diwania back to Kuwait. I think we were in Kuwait for like another 2 weeks, maybe. That I have like no formative memories, distinct memories of that time being back in Kuwait at all. I just know we went back to Kuwait. All I remember is being dropped off by a CH-53 and just getting annihilated by the rotor blast when they took off, and all the
And all
sharp
those
sand.
pebbles and shit. Yeah.
Other than that, like, really nothing, no memory of that. And yeah, went back to California, flew back in. We got flown commercial air back in. One of the guys who was in the battalion runs a company called Warfaced, and so he's been putting up some videos. I think the battalion's in their 20-year reunion right now. Unfortunately, I working, so I couldn't make it out. But he put up a video of the return of pictures of all of us in the flight, and like flight attendants holding our rifles, and uh yeah, we just went back. And
Okay, so when you guys are on the way back and you're talking about like, like is the mood that you guys have like you've just won the war, you've accomplished this, this is what they're telling you. It's like that the flight attendants are like the nurse in New York or in San Francisco when the sailor's kissing her kind of thing and everyone's like super stoked to be heading home and the war is over.
yeah, everyone I think was like pretty excited to be heading back. I was conflicted. I mean, I was glad to be heading home, and there was a sense of uh accomplishment and victory in the fact that, like, okay, like, did go to war and was involved in gunfights. I was shot at, and I'm still here to talk about it. So level of combat. At the same time, you know, I had built up what combat would be like in my mind, and it had been built up for us so constantly, like, that we would be bayoneting dudes and getting in hand to hand combat, that like that's what I'd expected. And so because it wasn't that, there was a lot of like, did we really like do it, or
Well,
and then
do you think that this is like a like, you know, I was talking with another Marine, and like nowadays, like we don't really have this like rite of passage, as like young men. And do you feel that, obviously you go through boot camp, you're like a part of this tribe, right? This fraternity of brothers that's now Marines. But do you feel that going through this invasion of Iraq, like you've gotten, into some pretty heavy gunfights and experienced some loss and had, like this sense of accomplishment, or what they tell you, you should have like sense of accomplishment winning the war. Um, do you feel that you've kind of met this standard for like being a man or being like a seasoned like veteran, combat veteran?
not really. I really never felt that way.
Okay.
Even even today, it doesn't. It never really felt like that. It wasn't. The idea of the follow-on deployments were definitely different. But this one, it was just. Yeah, it was just kind of like, yeah, we're going back, and then it nagged at me, and I know I wasn't the only one, but it nagged at me because it didn't feel done. Like it was not definitive enough to me that we had in fact won the war and everything was hunky dory and it's VJ Day 1945. Like
Right.
didn't feel that way, and I think it was about they held on to us, like we weren't allowed to take leave for like a month after coming back because they wanted to like, kind of keep an eye on us before they just sent us home.
Right.
But when I went home, uh, my parents threw a barbecue, which I asked them not to do because I didn't want to be applauded or, you know, held on high. I just wanted to relax. But they did anyways because, it was for them. Uh, and they made me give a speech. And I was like, yeah, hey, we did a thing. But I don't think it's over. And the best thing that everyone can do is be prepared for a long fight and help support us through that fight.
And you said this back then, like you knew you had this gut feeling that it wasn't over,
Yeah, yeah. I wish I was wrong.
right?
I really wish I was wrong. But yeah, it didn't feel right. Didn't feel done. Didn't feel right. Didn't feel we really accomplished anything. So I was like, I'm pretty sure there's going to be more, to this. And so I was like, yeah, like you know, thank you for being here, but like the best thing you can do is support us because it's gonna be more. It's gonna take longer. It's gonna be a while before this thing is like okay. So we're gonna need like your full support, as a nation. Uh, Otherwise, this thing just isn't gonna work out. And and unfortunately, I was right
Yeah.
because we
Well,
went.
so you do that, you're home and you have a feeling, and obviously we've been going at this for a hot minute now, but with in lieu of it being, the 20-year anniversary of essentially when all this was going down, I think it's an important thing to focus on, like the way that everything was set in place. Like you guys had to go through these experiences in order to be able, to, I guess, figure out what did and didn't work. And that's set obviously for your follow-on deployments. I mean, you went back to Iraq in 2004 or 2005 or it was 2004, right? The first Battle of Fallujah that you were in the spring of 2004. I really would like to, I guess, do this again and be able to hear about those things. But what I do want to talk about is, you know, reverting back to when I had mentioned that all this stuff played a factor in you doing what you do now with Maneuver Training Solutions and Orion Training Group. Um, the sense of understanding where the capabilities are not met at a baseline for your individually trained Marine, right? Like you can go through all these different things, but building on those basic fundamentals and being able to be proficient, right? And you have this idea of, like the modern day American rifleman, and through that idea, like all the experiences that you have had led you to that. So, can you explain a little bit on that mission statement for what you're trying to accomplish with Maneuver Training Solutions?
Yeah. Um, you know, again, MTS is open enrollment, and I support everyone, but the biggest thing that I wanted to provide was a place for the young service members, young Marines, because I am out here by Camp Lejeune, but uh, Fort Bragg, or now Fort Liberty, but we still say Fort Bragg, isn't too far. Um, there's some other bases out here. I wanted to provide a place where these service members could come out and gain extra knowledge on top of whatever they may be learning, hopefully a lot. And I know with the Marine Corps, the guys who are in my position, where I was, 20 years ago, are definitely better trained than I was, just as a baseline. Uh, but still trying to provide something where I can give more of what I know, what I have learned, so that they can be more prepared, and then giving it to them in a fashion where they can take that knowledge and they can teach it to their people. And that's the whole basis too behind the Instagram page of Blakewater 0326, was to give my knowledge on something that's seemingly as simple and as innocuous as individual equipment solutions, like what's the best place to put a magazine pouch, and what are more ideal versions of a magazine pouch. And obviously equipment is not as important as skill, but it is up there.
It's relative, yeah. It plays a factor in like how you're effectively able to employ whatever your loadout may be, and how to, you know, like considerations. That's probably one of the most genius things that I've, seen on Instagram. I mean, there's plenty of guys out there. I'm not trying to S your D. There's plenty of guys out there that put knowledge out but the thing is like obtained that knowledge through 20 years of service and multiple deployments and I'm throughout that I'm sure there's trials and tribulations. Obviously we talked about loss, failure, showing resiliency and coming back and rebounding from all that stuff, but you taking all of that, right? All of those things we just talked about and the ups and downs, and now you're able to give back to the guys that essentially could be walking and following in your footsteps. And on top of that, it's not just for a military or law enforcement. You don't have to meet a criteria as long as you're competent and capable with your weapon system. I know that that's one of the guidelines for your enrollment in your class. As long as you're able to operate your weapon in a safe manner, like that's your qualification for signing up for one of the classes. And I think by you doing that, opens up that doorway to that idea of the modern day rifleman and being able to give the everyday citizen the capability to, um, and it's not just, fundamentals with pistol and rifle. I mean, even when you guys, Orion Training Group, you get together with a group of dudes and you're doing small unit patrolling and stuff and uh, getting out and implementing these things that they see and they normally wouldn't have the ability to do without somebody like you instructing it, you know. Like you can watch all the YouTube videos and even the stuff of that you guys put out there and like making entry into a door or setting up your gear, but when you get that hands-on training and you're able to, you know, see it in the flesh, I mean that just obviously hits home a lot better than just watching YouTube videos.
Yeah, and that's what we wanted to provide. It's like, yeah, I want to provide this stuff for uh the military guys, and then getting into social media in that sphere and realizing just how many everyday people are looking for this stuff. And there definitely would have been a time in my career where I've been like, you don't need to know this, and you probably shouldn't know this. uh but that's kind of ways you think sometimes when you're young and impetuous. And now really seeing more of the big picture and everything that's going on, I realize how important it is, and the additional things that we can accomplish. Because yeah, you're coming and you're taking a class on pistol skills or CQB or patrolling or tac med or comms. But what we can do within the confines and structure of that class is create community.
Yep.
It's, students come to my class, and I end every class, I'm like, you have my email, you have my cell phone number, use it. You need something, use it. You know my social media, use it. You have a question, use it. Like, you met the other people of this class. I really hope you guys have exchanged some form of contact, even if it is just your social media. DM each other, create chats with each other, exchange phone information. Some guys exchange, business cards. I'm like, network, build community. So you find out like this guy lives, 30, 45 minutes from you, you just find yourself a range buddy.
Yep.
And then that range buddy turns into a guy that you invite over for barbecues. And that guy you invite over for barbecues is coming to celebrate your kid's birthday with you. And now you're exchanging Christmas gifts and stuff like that. Like, it goes far beyond just the training of hard skills. It's rebuilding sense of community, because one, we have kind of lost that as a nation. And then within the 2A community, the Second Amendment community, we all tend to be very isolationist. Like, hey, just leave me alone, let me enjoy my freedoms and my liberty. And like, these people are so annoying, but I'm just going to ignore them and they'll go away. Right? Like, kind of going back to like the whole like bully thing. Oh, just ignore them, they'll go away. They don't. Right? A bully only goes away one of two ways. One, you get somebody who has more authority or is stronger than you to take care of it for you, which is very temporary. Right? Then that bully just waits for that person of strength or authority to not be around, and now they want to get you even worse because you made them look bad or you got them in trouble, or both. Or you grow strong enough that they can't mess with you, that you are so strong for them to come at you is to their own detriment. That is a much more lasting solution. So by individually becoming more prepared and more capable and making yourself dangerous, but then by also doing that in groups, a community that is adhered together through common interests. And it's not just guns, it's barbecuing, it's bourbon, it's gardening, it's knitting patterns, what the hell ever it is. There's common ground, and you have common ground, and then you realize that there's this like system of bartering and trading of ideas and borrowing cups of sugar and can you watch my kids for the evening because I've got to suddenly work and they're too young to stay at home on their own and like little things and you just help each other out and it all spawns from a simple common interest somewhere and a community that helps itself and helps each other is a strong community and is therefore much harder to penetrate by negative outside sources. And then you start realizing that there are other communities adjacent to you that are a lot like you, or maybe exactly like you. And then you link up with that community and you just start growing this web that can just span nationwide. Right. And I'm not talking about utopia. I'm not that ridiculously, uh, ignorant or hopeful, but we can do a hell of a lot better
Yeah, you're
than
talking
what
about
we
having
have
like
been.
a support system of people like genuinely invested in those around them that have the like-minded or like mindsets. And the whole 2A community thing, that's just a whole topic for another day because there's a lot of um ego and toxicity that go into that and people thinking that they deserve something or they're owed something. And you can see the people that are really out there actually benefiting and not doing it for the followers or the likes are the ones that are actually out there. I mean, there's funny content and memes that are shared, but the data dump of knowledge that's provided at no cost. Like there's no, I'm sure that, yeah, there's subscription things that people can get involved in, but just by following along, there's things that you can pick up along the way. And seeing that somebody is, oh, I like this, I'm gonna go to one of these courses. Oh, dude, you're that other guy from Instagram, or here, let's exchange information. And like that whole process that you just explained out of how the relationships are built. Like I have literally experienced that, which Mitchell Reynolds. I mean, that's all how it all started, and I had met any of the guys that you work with, and it's cool to see that that does have a lasting effect. I mean, the fact that I've had dinner with his family at their kitchen table and said grace with them and slept in their basement and been able to run and gun on the range and like be able to immerse myself like that and like um be a part of somebody's family and know that anytime you can get like an invite or come hang out or hey, how you doing, dude? Happy Thanksgiving. All that stuff is awesome.
Yeah, and that's what it's really about, and that's why I'm so grateful and proud to be a part of Orion Training Group. When Jared brought me on, I had no idea that that was like one of his goals. I was retiring from the Marine Corps, and he just called me up. It's like, hey, do you want to come on to OTG? I was like, sure. I'm like, I kind of need a job because I just lost one. Uh, I'm like, yeah, you seem to have a level head on your shoulders, and I like training people, and I'm pretty good at it. So yeah, let's do this thing. But it's definitely become way more, which is awesome.
Oh, it's
Um,
insane how quickly that it exploded, dude. It's unbelievable. Um, yeah, to see that I was talking to Jason, just essentially that it started with some plywood and airsoft guns, and what it is now is quite like I mean, it's awesome.
yeah, yeah. So I'm all for it. You know,
Yeah, I mean,
I love it.
you're passionate about it, dude. I mean, it shows in the like in the way that you see like you instructing and laying out like the whatever it may be like the course of fire and how you're showing guys like things to improve on or talking about gear and giving legitimate like, hey, this could work. There's alternate solutions. It's not just you're not like like, oh, here, the Spiritus Systems pouch. This is what you need to be effective. Like everybody should have this on their kit. Well, hey, you might like this, you might like this. This works, this works. You got to fit it for yourself and how it applies to your mission. Not just like not everything's going to be a one size fits all for the gear that you have and this, weapon systems that you employ, whatever it may be. But I think that I've taken quite a bit of your time. You've given me some awesome insight and knowledge and told me some great stories about things that I never would have known had happened in the invasion of Iraq. I hope that we can do this again because I know that there's a lot more than that, like first 2 years of the Marine Corps. There's 18 more of them attached to that. And, obviously being an instructor at the recon school, combat instructor, I mean, being a force reconnaissance Marine for 17 years, obviously honorably retiring from the United States Marine Corps after 20 years of service is a feat of its own. So um, I've been meaning to get out and come train with you because I absolutely, like I said, I love it. I think it's awesome, and I like supporting, the veteran community with the right mindset, the right mission. So it's not just out there like buying random bullshit swag and like throwing people money. Like you're doing a good thing. So Blake, two things that I want to ask you. For one, it's on a lighter note. Two things that you would give to your intermediate shooters, both rifle and pistol. If you could have one drill for each weapon system that you can work on building basic fun or you've got a baseline for your fundamentals, but you want to improve on something. What's your go-to drill for pistol and rifle?
It used to be the Bills drill. And the Bills drill is a really good drill. It has now become doubles, shooting doubles. So the first time I was introduced to that was at a class with Matt Prunka of X-Ray Alpha. Um, he does stuff. He has his Redneck podcast with Ben Stager and a couple other gents. Um, they've been infamous in a sense, but uh, Matt's a USPSA Grandmaster, 20 some odd year veteran, worked at the unit, old Wakanda like myself. So I went to his class and it was a great class. And he used the doubles drill, which I think was created by Ben Stager. I'm not sure, but uh, point of it is to shoot predictively and to push the pace, working index, sight confirmation. But the way that I use the drill is basically how he used it with us is you you know, draw your pistol, present your rifle, you fire the first two rounds, and I ask my students to shoot reactively when they start, and that is reacting to sight. So I shoot at the speed I see sight. So, if I'm shooting with a dot, I see dot, I fire, I see dot, I fire, right? Focusing on the target, not hard focus on your sights. And you stay on after that pair, you stay on target, finger on the trigger, and it's just like a quick analysis of what you did. If something needs to be fixed, you make that quick correction and you send it again. And then whatever that correction was, it should hold. If the correction doesn't hold, you make the correction better and you fire another pair. And if the correction holds, then you look, what's the next thing that's dorking me up? Maybe first thing was grip. Maybe now you're having a hard time with the visual processing of remaining target focus. So you tell yourself harder, target focus, and you fire again. Do it for 6-8 rounds, holster up or, lower the rifle, relax, and then you get back at it. And as you do that drill, again, every time it's a quick analysis. That pause in between all the pairs is your time for a quick analysis of what happened. Am I still primed to succeed on this next, two shots? Make a correction, right? And hold that correction throughout. Don't compensate, right? So a correction would be my grip is slipping. I need to fix my grip and hold it. Because, with a bad grip, I'm shooting high and right. A compensation would be, oh, I'm hitting high and right. I'm going to aim low left, right? No, aim center mass. That drill has been really good for me. And it's been really great for my students. Before I learned that one, I was, I'd run handfuls of bills drills, and I'd run a handful of just draw, fire, pair, kind of analyze what was going on, draw and fire, pair. But it was really hard for students to isolate that one correction when they've got to draw the pistol again. And
Right.
now they have to think about their draw, about building their grip again. Whereas they can set now with the doubles, you can draw, and if your grip's not perfect on that first pair, you can get it set. Like this is what it should be like, and I maintain that grip to the next 4, 6 rounds. Okay, my grip didn't slip. That's the right grip. Trigger pull was good. I just need to keep doing this. And then you holster up. Now you build that grip. You build that from the holster, right? And if it didn't work, you fix it again, and then you try again from the holster. Um, so that is the drill that I would recommend for any beginner to intermediate shooter, and even advanced shooters can make use of that drill. Because once you understand, you shoot reactively at the speed of sight, sight shot, sight shot, sight shot, sight shot. Because then you can understand the behavior of your sights. Your sights will tell you if you're doing something wonky, right? If your sights go way off, high, off, left, or right, means your grip's not good. So you got to fix that grip, fix your stance, make sure you got good equal tension on the gun. And then once your sights start operating in a very predictable pattern, they do like the same thing every time you fire, and it's where it should be, right? There's not anything wild or crazy. They're staying right where they should. Now that you understand, like, hey, from 10 yards, when I pull the trigger on my rifle, my dot doesn't leave the A zone. Like it stays within the A zone. This little movement stays there. So that means that I can pull the trigger again before I confirm sights again.
Mm-hmm.
So I can come up, sight confirmation, pow, pow. Now they're not going to be stacked right on top of each other, but they're going to be A zone, which translates to, you know, high success in competition and high success if you have to fight another person,
Right.
because the zone is the vitals, right? So you start shooting predictably, and then you start working on pushing that predictive pace further back by tightening up all of your fundamentals, by getting better grip on your pistol, better grip on your rifle, better connection to your gun, more aggressive stance. And now you can push that predictive pace back and back and back, and pushing really aggressive, understanding that, like, you know, if you're shooting at quarter-second splits at 50 yards with a rifle, what does that give you for accuracy, you know, down the target? Does that mean 1 alpha, 1 Charlie every time? Well, against a person in a fight, that's pretty acceptable at 50 yards.
Yeah.
Obviously, 2 alphas would be better, but if I can guarantee shooting at a quarter second, I can put one right about in the heart and one somewhere in the lungs, that's going to do some work. So, yeah, shoot doubles, shoot reactive so you understand the behavior of your sights. Keep tightening it up so that there's less and less inherent wobble and movement in your sights. And then once you understand that pattern, it's predictable, it's consistent, start shooting predictively and pushing that predictive pace further and further and further back. And then when you aren't successful predictive, that's when you know, okay, at this distance, to be successful, I need to shoot reactive. And that's the distance you work at. Like if you're really good with a pistol at 7 yards, stop working at 7 yards. Go to 15. Work at 15 yards. Right. And then when you're really successful at 15 yards, go to 30. Work at 30 yards. And when you're really good at 30 yards, go to 50. Work at 50 yards. Right. So yeah. There's
Yeah, yeah, that's dude, that's great. That's I was expecting you just to say like, oh yeah, try this. You can look it up on. That's a deep explanation. I mean, that just shows obviously the knowledge that you have behind, and it's not. It seems like outside of just what you learned in the service, and obviously being in force reconnaissance, like you have continued to be a student and train other people's courses of fire. Am I correct in saying that?
yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I've got I'm teaching one more OTG class here in April, and then in May, I've got 2 classes I'm attending as a student. So I'm really looking forward to those.
Nice. That's awesome, dude. But I hope that we can have, I know you're busy, I know you got things going. Hopefully we can get do this again. You've provided a lot of good insight, and I know that you got plenty more, and that people will be interested in hearing this. That's for sure. So, I appreciate your time. Thank you for everything. And it was like I said, this is awesome, dude. You have no idea. So I'm super stoked about this. But hey,
I'm
everybody,
happy to be here, man. Thanks for the opportunity.
yeah, dude, seriously, that's awesome. But yeah, that was Blake Flannery, guys, on the Pressing Forward podcast.